Kajiwa sa mga jiuna ka. Liko charge.
This is Reshma Kerkar. Please mute yourself.
Recording in progress.
Borkar sir, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are. Yes, sir, you are. Yes, Dr. Pradeep.
Yes, sir, because there are some messages that there is no audio. I think you can inform everybody that it is yet to start.
Yes, right. The organizing secretary, Dr. Preeti, to do the needful. Calling out to Dr. Preeti, please.
Please bear with us. We'll be starting in a few minutes.
Dr. Preeti, I think we have the requisite quorum. A good number of delegates have already logged in. And if everything is okay, I think we should start.
Yes, sir. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. We are yet to make another speaker as the co-host. So we'll start once we do that.
Hello, Mr. Harish Prabhu, is there something you wish to say? Because your hand is raised.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Preeti Pereira, Assistant Professor at the Department of Zoology, Carmel College. I welcome you all to this international webinar on diversity and conservation concerns of marine mammals, organized by the Biodiversity Research Cell, Department of Zoology, Carmel College, in collaboration with the Goa State Biodiversity Board and our knowledge partner, Wildlife Institute of India. Thank you for taking out your time and being here today. As a Catholic institution, we would like to invoke the blessings of the Almighty for the success of our webinar. May the Lord bless this event, the organizers, speakers, and delegates. To begin, I invite Ms. Karen Braganza, Assistant Professor at the Department of Zoology, to introduce our convener and our patrons.
So to begin, I welcome our convener, Dr. Manoj Purkar, Head of the Department of Zoology, Carmel College for Women, Goa. In his tenure as an academician for over 33 years, he has done extensive research in many areas, including wildlife and conservation. I invite you, sir, to brief us about the Biodiversity Research Cell and the event that we are having today. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon to everybody. I am Dr. Porkar, currently heading the Department of Zoology at Goa's Premier Institute for Higher Learning for Women. The Biodiversity Research Cell, which is the organizing agency along with the Goa State Biodiversity Board and the Wildlife Institute of India as a knowledge partner, has been an affiliate of the Department of Zoology at Carmel College for Women. The PRC kits until now, with a main focus on imparting training in field biology, as also documenting the faunal resources of the state of Goa and Western Ghats in general. We also, of course, take upon ourselves the mandate of grooming and eco-feminist leadership in our students. As a Catholic institute, which we uphold the eco-ethics in all our teaching programs. In the last 20 years, if I may put across the major milestones that we have achieved is we have documented a database on various faunal groups, currently focusing extensively on arachnology. We have contributed very significantly as an academic unit to the policy documents, particularly the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan of the Indian government. Of course, the Goa State Strategy and Action Plan for Biodiversity of the state of Goa as well. Besides, of course, we have been doing a lot in terms of capacity building through information. In fact, our motto is conservation through education. And therefore, we lay a lot of emphasis on awareness programs and hands-on training programs in collaboration with a lot of state and national institutes of expertise in the area of biodiversity and conservation biology. We have also, as an academic institution, put a little bit in terms of greening the academic curricula at various levels, from schools to university curriculum, being knowledge facilitators through our collaboration and partnership with various agencies in the state of Goa and across the nation, and even with some international organizations. We had a seminar on crocodile conservation issues to celebrate the World Crocodile Day. Then we had very recently another Wildlife Week celebration that was an overwhelming response from as many as 23 states and quite a few countries. We have many more events coming up in very active, already identified and having MOU with. Once again, I wish to reiterate that as an academic unit, our focus is conservation through education. And before I let the session progress, I wish to convey my gratitude and my appreciation to all those who sought to partner with us. Of course, a big word of appreciation to the expert speakers for the international webinar, to all of you out there who've shown enthusiasm in registering for this event, and not to forget, of course, the prestigious Wildlife Institute of India that has been a knowledge partner for today's event. So once again, thank you so much. It's great to have you all with us for this international webinar. I'm confident that with all our amazing speakers out there, we will have an extremely have a pleasant day. Thank you so much. Back to you, Karen.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to introduce our patrons for this event. So first, we have with us the head of our institution, Dr. Sister Maria Lizanne AC. She is a zoologist who has a research interest in the field of nematology and has obtained a doctorate in the same field. She has been a summer research fellow for the Indian Academy of Sciences and was awarded as the best scientist, the Best Scientist Award in Animal Biotechnology at IMRF, the 100th International Conference. I invite you, Sister Principal, to introduce our institution to the delegates present here.
A very good afternoon to all. I feel proud and privileged to welcome all of you to this international webinar on diversity and conservation concerns of marine mammals, organized by the Department of Zoology of Carmel College of Arts, Science and Commerce for Women, in partnership with Goa State Biodiversity Board and Wildlife Institute of India. It is an honor for Carmel College to tie up with such eminent and prestigious bodies of the state and the country for this webinar. A special welcome to Shri Kunal IAS, Secretary, Environment and Climate Change, Government of Goa, Dr. Pradeep Sarnokadam, Member Secretary, Goa State Biodiversity Board, Convener of this webinar, Dr. Manoj R. Borkar, Head Department of Zoology, Dr. Priti Pereira, Organizing Secretary, members of the Technical Sessions and Registration Committee, and to you all, dear participants, who have shown their interest by joining the webinar. I am very grateful and happy that all of you are a part of this webinar because you will gain a lot through the various sessions and knowledge of which is very relevant to the present times. Department of Zoology of Carmel College of Arts, Science and Commerce for Women has chosen a very relevant topic for this webinar because it is a pressing need of the hour that we become aware and work towards the conservation of marine mammals, as these are now a threatened and endangered species for various reasons known and unknown to human beings. A few words about Carmel College for Women. This is run by the Sisters of the Apostolic Carmel Congregation and is nestled at the foothills of Nove, Goa, India. It is a serene, untainted, picturesque village, and as one enters the gates of Carmel College, one is greeted with a verdant ambience and a spacious campus which makes one feel relaxed and rejuvenated. In this institution, we groom feminist leadership and instill an environmental friendly ethos in the students. In 2024, Carmel College will complete 60 years. A little bit about marine mammals. Of the 120 odd species of marine mammals found in the world, 30 to 35 cetaceans like whales, dolphins, and porpoises, and one sirenian, the dugong, are found in the waters of the Indian subcontinent. Marine mammals are protected domestically and internationally under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and marine mammal species that are endangered or threatened are protected by the Endangered Species Act. I'm sure this webinar will instill and further boost the morale of our younger generation, along with the well-experienced and dedicated scientists, to work with enthusiasm and love in the conservation not only of marine mammals, but of all species, as we are all interconnected through food chains and food webs. So, once again, a warm and cordial welcome to every one of you participating in this webinar and making it a success. A special welcome to our well-resourced speakers, Dr. K. Shivakumar, Kartik Ashok, and Dr. Mirdulla Srinivasan. Wishing all of you an interesting, educative, informative, and enriching time. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you, sister. I now call upon the next patron, who is Dr. Pradeep Sarmukadam, Member Secretary, Goa State Biodiversity Board. He is a member of the Goa Wetland Authority, a certified lead auditor, and a nodal officer for the state level steering committee for National Adaptation Fund for Climate Change. I invite you, sir, now to address the delegates present here.
A very warm welcome to everyone who is present here. Mainly, I would like to welcome Shri Kunal sir, who is the chairman of Goa Coastal Zone Management Authority, also Secretary for Environment, Power, Renewable Energy and Justice. We also would like to extend a warm welcome to all the presenters of today, especially from Wildlife Institute of India, who had kindly consented to be our partners, knowledge partners in this program. I would also like to extend a great welcome and continued association with Carmel College for Women, because this is a particular college which had established the first biodiversity research cell in our state. And it gives a pleasure to say that last time when we had the conference, our registration was 500, that was also full. Today also we feel that the number has crossed 700 and so many countries participating. I think it only exhibits that the interest of all the people around the globe in the ecological conservation and protection is not only limited to the lip service, but everybody wants to be participatory. And as a biodiversity board, I would like to say that we are one of the first biodiversity board who has started preparing people's biodiversity registers to such a level that our documentation is highly technical and validated at 3 levels. While participatory approach for documentation of biodiversity, it is most important to have conservation of biodiversity through participation, because none of the governments or any states, they cannot conserve biodiversity. It has to be conserved with people's effort, and it has to be conserved by everybody. If you look at the threats to the marine mammals, the percentage is very high. Almost 25% of the marine mammals are believed to be under threat in the red category as per IUCN. And if you look at the threats, it is not only accidental capture or habitat destruction, which are in most of the cases, but the harassment is something that I would like to just emphasize. Whenever people go to see biodiversity, especially if you see dolphin trips, you find one dolphin being chased by 15, 16 boats as if everybody is out there to hunt. And I think this is one approach which makes them more vulnerable because they are bigger in size, they're a little different. May it be otters, or may it be sea, mammals which are large in size, maybe dolphins. We have almost more than 11 types of dolphins in the world. And you can see, looking at the diversity of this huge mammal, it is very important to see that their intelligence is also there, and there is relatively lesser research on it. Although we know that a lot of work is happening, it is very important to ensure that we do not create another story of, Stellar's cow, where it was almost extinct only because people consumed it to a great extent. So I think the message is loud and clear that conservation of marine mammals will not be possible only with acts, rules, and the treaties. I think it requires larger efforts from all sectors, and it has to be participatory. We have to take people together. Disposal of plastic, which is a greatest threat, may it be single-use plastic or any other type of mooring ropes which strand these animals. And I think the shipping gears, these are all great issues. In spite of having security levels of ISPS code, having SOLAS and having all those things in place, we still find that the conservation needs far more efforts. So with that brief, I would like to wish everyone a great luck for this conference, wishing you all the best. And I also wish that more such conferences will come up on the specific ecosystems, specific species. And I think with the help of Dr. Borkar sir, we are all working very closely together, and this could set a great example of collaborative awareness. And it may not be only collaborative. Let us hope that it becomes a continuous, and we create a strong pressure group at the international level, at the national level, and also at the state level to have a behavioral based awareness for the conservation. So I once again thank organizers for giving me an opportunity to speak to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for highlighting all of the issues and threats that the marine mammals are facing. I now welcome Shri Kunal, Officer of the Indian Administrative Service and Incumbent Secretary, Environment and Climate Change, Government of Goa. He is also the Chief Electoral Officer of Goa and has conducted many election processes in the state. I invite you, sir, to now give your opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon to the organizers and all the participants. I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
It's really an honor and privilege for me to speak in such an august gathering. that too which deals with one of the area which is very close to my heart, that is preservation and conservation of the diversity, and that too in the marine areas. As we know, like all over the world, there is a greater emphasis on preserving the biodiversity, and there is a almost accepted evidence of climate change, which is adversely affecting the climate and all the habitat. So we have to have a clear-cut baseline study as to what kind of changes are occurring, what kind of the biodiversity exists. Whatever we could see with our naked eyes that is on the land, we are obviously aware of that. But a great deal of study is required for the whatever is below our sea level, that is in the marine area, in the ocean sea floor. And as we know, that a great number of mammals, great number of organisms, they exist in the oceans, which cover 3/4 of our Earth, Mother Earth. And whatever we could see, like we are in Goa right now, we could see like dolphins are like one of the common sighting here, and it is also gathering. It is also having a major tourist attraction in Goa, and it is having its own issues related to that. So whatever we could see, these are only, I would say, few minor percentage of the marine mammals which our mother nature is conserving, preserving, and having. But more and more they exist, which require proper documentation, which requires proper support through law, through conventions. And that way, we need to have proper conservation intervention and rigorously generated baseline data. In pragmatic action, we can take only when clear-cut scientific information is available, when clear-cut data is available. So this webinar is being organized by the Biodiversity Research Cell of Carmel College for Women, Goa, in partnership with our Goa State Biodiversity Board and Wildlife Institute of India. And we definitely feel from the Environment Department that it will ensure a good relation between the entire community which is engaged in preservation and conservation of biodiversity all over the world, particularly more so in the marine areas. And this forum will bring in more and more persons of international repute in this arena. And we from the state of Goa, we are fortunate to have so much biodiversity in our state, in our coastal areas, in our marine areas. And we as a global community must ensure that wherever it exists, we should be saving for it, we should be caring for it, and we should all become a collective custodian for all the bioresources which Mother Nature has given to us. I wish this international webinar a grand success. Thanks to the organizer.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. We are extremely pleased to have had over 650 participants registered from various academic and research institutions from 24 states of India and from institutions abroad, such as Polytechnic University of Marche, Italy, Center of Marine Sciences, University of Algarve, Portugal, University Liege, Spain and Belgium, University of Leeds, UK, King Abdullah University of Science and Technology from Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait Institute of Scientific Research. We will be running a live Q&A at the end of each session, and the chat box feature has been enabled. So if you have any questions, just type them in the chat as soon as the session continues. Please don't wait for the session. I apologize for that. Without further delay, I'm sorry about that. Without any further delay, I would like to introduce our first speaker. We have with us Dr. K. Sivakumar. Dr. K. Sivakumar is Scientist F and Head Department of Endangered Species Management at the Wildlife Institute of India and has had 23 years of research experience on threatened fauna of India, especially marine biodiversity and birds. He has been working for the integrated management of aquatic biodiversity and its habitats in India. He is currently coordinating the Wildlife Monitoring Program of India in Antarctica. Apart from research, he is involved in teaching and training of postgraduate students, in service forest officers and PhD scholars in wildlife techniques and management and conservation biology. Professor Sivakumar is one of the pioneers of capacity building programs for enhancing integrated management of marine protected areas in India, especially for forest and fisheries sectors. He is a member of various international bodies, including World Commission on Protected Areas, Invasive Species, Marine Mammals, and Wetland and Freshwater Specialist Groups. He is the Nodal Officer for CITES and CMS Cell of Wildlife Institute of India and advisor to the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India. At present, he has been coordinating the Campa Dugong Recovery Program of India and Envis Center at Wildlife Institute of India. I invite Professor Sivakumar to shed some light on marine mammal conservation in India. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and good morning and good evening also, because few members said to early morning. First, let me thank you, Cornell College for Women, as well as the Goa Biodiversity Board for having me in this afternoon. What I'm planning to do that, I'm going to give some insight to the ongoing marine mammal conservation program, which the government of India, along with the various state government, they're trying to do that. And also the future plan of the government of India, how we are planning to take care of our marine mammals and the marine biodiversity in the future. So I have a small presentation. I will go through the presentation, but I would like to have more questions and discussion so that we can discuss more about what's happening in the marine mammal conservation in India. Let me share the presentation. I hope my presentation is visible.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay, thank you very much. That's what the title is given to me. In fact, the title of this particular webinar, it is actually need of the hour, as mentioned by the all three speakers and maybe four speakers. All of them are reiterated the one point that we have to take care of our biodiversity, including a marine biodiversity, because our attention towards marine biodiversity was comparatively very low, because we have always looked at the marine biodiversity as a commercial product instead of looking or appreciating its ecological value. That understanding realization started maybe 10 or 15 years before only. And before that, we have always looked at the commercial aspect of the marine biodiversity. But you know, like even Professor Borkar is that senior person. He may be knowing very well that India had a lot of experts, large number of marine experts in our country, large number of marine institutions in the country. We have more than 100 years old of research in marine biodiversity. But unfortunately, most of these researchers are actually look at the commercial aspect of the marine resources. Only recently, we can say that 2 decades or 1.5 decades ago, we started looking or appreciating the ecological value of this marine biodiversity. Though it is late, but it is not too late. As the secretaries of, as well as previous other speaker also mentioned, we have to act now at least. That's what important. The animal which you are looking at the screen, that is what very close to my heart. There's a sea cow. It has a lot of story to tell. I'll be talking more about the sea cow later stage of my presentation. how we are trying to bring back this species, which is almost in the brink of extinction in our country. But before that, all of you know, especially my friends from abroad, this is the country, one of the 17 mega biodiversity country. We have various climatic zones within a country, starting from Kanyakumari, the southernmost point of India, to the northern or east to west. Wherever you cross, Indian speaks different language, they wear different cloth, eat different kinds of food. This is with a different kind of tradition and culture, but still they are united. That is the diversity which we have in India that makes India is one of the wonderful country in the world. When you're coming to the wildlife or a biodiversity, it's equally as like a people of India. The biodiversity of India also wonderful. We have a huge, rich diversity, about 140,000 species of plants and animals we have it. We yet to identify some more species. Probably we may be having about 200,000 species of plants and animals in our country. So we have a rich biodiversity. That's what we call them as one of the 17 mega biodiversity country in the world. And India is the one country takes care of its biodiversity with some kind of conservation planning framework. And the conservation framework was very old also. It is because even before enforcing or bringing any law, that is Wildlife Protection Act, Indians have been taking care of the biodiversity. And traditionally also we are well known for taking care of our biodiversity. And right now India brought almost 20% of the landscape into some kind of a protection and the conservation measures. That is the way we actually operate right now. But coming to the marine system, we are very poor in taking care or protection of the marine biodiversity and their habitat. The reason is India having a very long coastal line. We have about 7,516 kilometer long coastline. It is very long to manage it. And another thing is the territorial sea itself, where Indian laws are applicable right now. The most of the law, including the Wildlife Protection Act, is applicable up to the territorial sea. That territorial sea itself, 160,000 square kilometer area, very vast. But if we include the Indians' economic exclusive zone, then that is running for more than 20 lakh square kilometer. That is a 2.2 million square kilometer. And here in the 2.2 million square kilometer area, it is a huge sea we have it in our India. That is the strength of India. And these particular regions, there's such a vast sea, having a wonderful biodiversity resources. And that resource is going to help the future generation of India. That is what government of India feeling strongly now. But what are we doing with these resources? Are we taking care of them? If you ask these questions, definitely I can say that we are not at all taking care of these resources. Because there are conflict in the policy level decision. We don't know how to take care of the bioresources, biodiversity, which are outside territorial water, because there is no existing legal mechanisms to help the government to or particular enforcement agents to take care of that. These are the certain issues we are having it right now. I have saying that this is a nutshell of the marine ecosystem of our country. As I mentioned earlier, India is really rich with the 2.2 million square kilometer area of the sea. That is the biggest region we're having it. And that region, India has already, my Madam Principal mentioned, Sister Principal, she mentioned that India has 32 to 35. In fact, then we have about 35 species of marine mammals, such as dolphin, porpoise, whales, dugongs, and minimum. And they may be having a more because we are very poor in marine research. Probably we may be having a more also. And also we identified there are some important, globally important marine mammal areas all along the Indian coast. So that is another interesting things about India. It's not only the marine mammals we have it in our country, because Indian marine biodiversity if I don't talk about sea turtle, then my talk will be incomplete. Because Indians are known for conserving marine turtle in a big way. Especially when I talk in people from Goa, I must mention here because Goa people are very good and take care of the nesting beaches along the coastal. You do have some good turtle nesting beaches, and the community in that coastal area helps in conservation of the sea turtle with the help of the forest department. And we have 5 species of sea turtle, and then we also have one species that is olive ridley. There are 50% of olive ridley population lives in Indian water. That's another interesting thing about India. We should be very proud of that. And it's not only the mammals or sea turtles. We too have excellent habitats such as coral reefs, seagrass beds, mangrove habitat, and even the coral reef. We have a rich diversity. There is a researchers would estimate more than 500 species of coral reefs. The nearest coral reefs for Goa people is in Naitrani Island in Karnataka, or you go to the northern part of your Malvan where you can see the coral reefs. You may be having a few corals in off coast of Goa also, but in a very smaller number. So India, in this particular sea, the 2.2 million square kilometer area, have a lot of potential fisheries, hydrocarbons sources are available, minerals are available. Of course, it has an excellent potential of tourism. Goa and then Andaman, Nicobar, Lakshadweep, there are a few places where actually we promote the coastal tourism or a tourism in the coastal area. But India has a huge potential of promoting a tourism, because promoting a ecotourism, it is a very good for that, so that we can earn a lot of money, we can support the livelihood of the poor people, and same time we should not disturb the biodiversity. These are important things are there. So one more thing about conservation, because we strongly believe at Wildlife Institute of India that any conservation should benefit the community. Otherwise, there is no meaning of doing a conservation. We very strongly believe on that. So with come to the marine biodiversity, there are about 50 million Indians are directly depend on marine resources. So we have to take care of the marine biodiversity, and also we should understand that the livelihoods of the 50 million peoples are also directly depend on the conservation of marine biodiversity. So I've been saying that India already planning to improve their strengthen the blue economy, because entire global community realized that we already drained out resources on the land. So now we move towards to the marine ecosystem. So the marine ecosystem going to be the future of the livelihood of the future generation. That understanding we have it, as my previous speaker mentioned, because 70% of the earth was covered with the water. So we have to take care of that. India is planning to strengthen and want to become a leader in blue economy. We can actually become a leader in the blue economy, especially in the South Asian regions. So the moment I talk about a coastal and marine, and I'd like to give a small insight to the young generation that we do have a good beaches in our country. Yes, Goa are known for a good beaches, but really there are good beaches are there in Andaman. It's a far better than a Goa. So since the secretary attending this webinar, my request is the Goa beach also must have once upon a time looked like a Andaman beaches. Now they are looking not that much good as like an Andaman. Reason I no need to explain that. We have to bring back that old glory of the beaches of Goa. We have to do a lot. We have to work with the community. We have to work with all the stakeholders. Make sure that the beaches are neat and clean and not dirty. It's not that only the beaches we have it along the Indian coast. We do have a certain important habitat such as mud flats, the intertidal mud flats. We do have intertidal seasonal. Why I'm telling that, when you're talking about a marine mammal conservation, certain habitats also playing a critical role that we have to look after that. And these critical habitats are very close to us. So that's what I want to give a small insight to this important habitat. So if you go to the Muthupet in Tamil Nadu or Kalpa Kutch, Ranap Kutch in Gujarat, we have a huge seasonal mud flats. People may not know about them, because we know about intertidal mud flat, but people may not be knowing the interseasonal mud flat. Interseasonal mud flats also ecologically very important, and also it supports millions of people. Then we have mangrove habitat all along the Indian coast. And all of you must be aware of that, the ecological role of the mangrove ecosystem. It's an excellent adaptive plan for mitigation for the climate change. So we should also take care, because the mangrove habitats are actually acting as a breeding ground for many, many commercial fishes there. Then coral reefs, as no need to explain again. Coral reefs is very important coastal habitat. This is the habitat also visited by marine mammals in a larger number because of this richness, diversity. Then another important habitat we have it in our country. This is the habitat also accommodate the marine mammals. That's the sea grasses. Any flowering plants under the water in the seas, we call them as sea grasses. And these sea grasses also act as a breeding ground for several species which are commercially important and important species for livelihood of the community. And Government of India right now having a certain policy guidelines to take care of the conservation and management of the marine biodiversity. One of the foremost guideline, the policy document which we refer always, is the India's National Wildlife Action Plan. Right now, we are running the third India's National Plan after independence. This action plan started from 2017 and 31. This action plan is a unique in nature, because this is the first time the National Wildlife Action Plan included an exclusive chapter of our coastal and marine ecosystem. In the previous two action plan, we didn't talk anything about coastal and marine biodiversity, but it is added now. That itself reflects that the Government of India is concerned about the coastal and marine biodiversity and their conservation. They understood that the importance of conserving these particular resources. And that history is very back. And if you look into the history of marine animal conservation in India, it's very bold. It's not that we started now. In fact, in 1991, the Government of India released a stamp on Dugong and also released a stamp on dolphins, both marine dolphin as well as gangetic dolphin. And later on, there was a stamp on whale shark. And because India is very good, got an excellent name in conserving the whale shark, one of the successful program. Of course, I'm not going to cover a whale shark because I'm limiting myself into mammals, not a fish. And then sea turtle, which I mentioned already, India is really proudly, we can say in the global community, India doing really good for conservation of sea turtle. So India releases the stamp to get more awareness, create more awareness among the people. The one interesting thing about the Dugong, which is very close to my heart, is why India is so concerned about the Dugong. Because when you talk about marine mammal conservation, the Government of India, the three-state government, chosen the first species as a Dugong. The reason is, once upon time, I'm talking about the 20 to 40 million years ago, India had 4 species of dugongs in our country. All 4 species seems to be occurred in the Gujarat. We don't know, it might have occurred in all along the Indian coast. But the fossils we found only in the Gujarat coast, thanks to the IIT Roorkee scientists. They discovered these fossils and then identified, very interesting name also they given. They given the Parethyseran indica Domnicia, so the Parethyseran Kachensis, because Kutch is the fossil found from the Kutch, so it's named as a Kachensis. And then the oldest fossils of Dugong seems to be the first Dugong on the earth that was named as Ashokia antiqua. So India had that highest diversity or richest diversity of sea cows anywhere in the world. That is another important thing. That is the reason is India is actually pushing the Dugong conservation at the global level and want to be a leader, want to show the global community that Dugong, India can do a better job in the marine mammal conservation. India initiated the World Dugong Day, and every year in the last 3 years, we have been celebrating the World Dugong Day with the support of the global community. That is again contribution of the Government of India in this respect. So the Dugong means this is an animal. It's not a Dugong can't swim very fast. They are a floater. They live in the coastal habitat, especially in the seagrass habitat. In the shallow water animal, they don't go. They may go, but by and large, they are seen in within 20-meter deep water, very close to the shore, because seagrass grows up to 7 to 10 meters. That is an normal average depth of the seagrasses. This sea cow eats on seagrasses. That's why it's called a sea cow. And even some people say that these sea cows are Lord Krishna's own cow. His kingdom drowned in Gujarat, Dwarka region, his cows are so drowned, and then he gave a power them to live under the water as a sea cow. That is a belief the people of Gujarat having it. Whatever, that is not our discussion, but the sea cows are herbivore, largely feed on the sea grasses, and they live in along the coastal habitat of our country. Right now, they occurs in the Gulf of Kutch in Gujarat, Gulf of Mannar and Kalpalpe in Tamil Nadu coast, very close to Rameshwaram, and then Andaman Nicobar Island. These are the three regions we have it in our country. Otherwise, the dugongs are there in Australia to Africa. One of the major problem for dugongs in our country, because the report says that 60 years before, India might be had around 20,000 dugongs in our country. Right now, we have less than 250 individual. Reason was cited that because of the interface with the fishing activity, the dugongs got entangled in the fishing net, and the drowns mean they die, because dugongs are like a human being. They air breather. They breathe through lungs. They have to come to the surface. We call them a surfacing. So they have to surface to breathe. And if they are unable to surface, then they will die like a human being. So when any dugong which is entangled, accidentally or deliberately entangled with the fishing net, and those dugongs will die. That is a major issue we observed in our Indian water. And then second problem we noticed in India is boat strike. As I mentioned earlier, dugongs are not a good swimmer. They are floater. They swim very slow. When you're speeding boat approaching them, they may not in a position to swim away very quickly. So sometimes, most of the time, they get confused with the noise. They get hit by the boat. They die. And the third most important problem we are facing with respect to considering the dugong is poaching, especially in Tamil Nadu and Andaman Nicobar. Many dugongs were poached in the past. But Gujarat poaching was not there, but Gujarat was the other problem, like a fisheries interface, boat strike, or a pollution was the major problem in the Gujarat coast. But in Tamil Nadu, this poaching, fisheries interface, and boat strike was the problem. Andaman, all are there, but in a minimum number. Apart from these three major issues, we do have other common problem. These common problems are there for many other mammals also, like sand touching, pollution, coastal development, climate change. All those things are there. Either they will affect directly to the marine mammals or a dugong, or they will affect their habitat. This is what these are the problems. So after understanding the problems, and because of these threats, what we come to know that the population pushed into a brink of extinction with the 250 individuals. If you see that pictures in Tamil Nadu coast having the largest population, about 150, the Andaman may be having about 75, and then Gulf of Kutch probably having 15 to 30 individual. This is what we have it. So this is the right time for us to bring back, otherwise we lose this animal. Once we had a richest diversity, means 4-5 species, including the current one, 5 species of dugongs India had. But if India lose the dugong, it's a really shameful for us. So we have to do something, and we know the problem, reason for declining of the dugong. So we have to remove those threats so that this population species will come back. It's a beautiful, wonderful, lovely animal, peace living animal. It can't even escape from the threat. That's a poor guy. It's not like a dolphin, at least it can swim fast. This poor animal can't even swim actually. So sweet, but unfortunately more vulnerable to the human pressure. We also know that these are the gardener, because seagrass habitat, the one dugong habitat we consider as about a 20 square kilometer. That is the seagrass batch required for a one dugong happily live in a year. So this 20 square kilometer area of the seagrass contribute about 2 crore rupees to the Indian rupee, 2 crore rupees to the human being, because that much wealth of volume of the fishes are breeding in this particular habitat. That is the production of the fishery resources from the 20 square kilometer seagrass birds in India. So someone has to manage the seagrass. Overgrowth of the seagrass not conducive for the fishes to breed. So someone has to weed out the abundance of the seagrass. So who will do it? These dugongs are doing free of cost. They actually manage the seagrasses, making sure that the seagrasses are conducive for thousands of animals to breed there, which are commercially important, and it is directly linked to the livelihood of the human people who are living in that area. So we call them as a gardeners of the seagrass bed, the dugongs. So after having this importance, after knowing the problem, so government of India realized that we have to recover the species from the South Asia. So the government invited our neighboring country, friends from neighboring country, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Maldives. So because these are the 4 countries where we historically known to see dugong. But later on we realized that no dugongs there in Maldives, Pakistan and Bangladesh, but we do have dugongs in India and Sri Lanka. So the first meeting we took place in Tuticorin in Tamil Nadu coast, were very close to Gulf of Mannar. All 5 countries participated, but all 5 agreed to take care of the dugong. Even in future, if they come across the dugong in the range, they assured that their dugong will be taken care. That assurance given it. And at the same meeting, it was decided to develop a action plan for dugong conservation. The Indian National Action Plan was developed, and I'm happy that I was the part of the same group which is developed this action plan. So what we did it, we want to recover the species, we want to recover their habitat, and we can't do it without help of the community. My previous speaker also mentioned this point. Working in a marine environment, we have to work with the various stakeholders, especially the fishing community. So we have to work with the stakeholder, and most importantly, the 4th objective of the action plan is building a capacity of the stakeholders, some of the stakeholders, especially forest department, fisheries department, coast guard, marine. These are the sectors actually working in the marine environment. So that's why the National Action Plan of the Dugong looked into these 4 aspects and developed actions for that. After finalizing the action plan, again approached the state government, all 3 state government, Tamil Nadu, Andaman, Nicobar Island and Gujarat. We presented our action plan, and then these 3 government already doing a lot of good work in conserving the dugong and their habitat. So we thought of integrating our national action plan with their ongoing program, and then we started implementing the program in the ground. So then also we realized, because marine mammal conservation required the help from the marine police, Indian Coast Guard and the Indian Navy. Without their help, it's very difficult for us to conserve marine mammals in India at least. Because the vast coast, 2.2 million square kilometers of the sea, comes under the control of Navy and the Coast Guard. And these are the 2 major stakeholders going to take care of the marine. So we are involved in them also in dugong conservation. And then I had a huge research team, about 25 research scholars, both girls and boys, amazing researchers. They work 24/7. They dive every day in the sea and try to understand, collect data, because the data kept was mentioned by the Goa Biodiversity Board member secretary that we have to build a data. Even Kunal Saf also mentioned that importance of data, because a lot of data gaps are there. So we need a good science to help us in planning process. So data collection is very important. So thanks to my researchers, they are collecting a data, good data. We are trying to understand the ecology of the status, ecology, distribution pattern, associated pieces of the dugong and seagrass habitat, all those research aspects. We have been working on it for last 6 years. And also we identify the critical dugong habitat, because sighting a dugong in India is very, very rare. If anybody want to see a dugong right now, the best place is Andaman, where if you spend 2-3 days, you have a likelihood that you can see a dugong. But the other second likelihood in Tamil Nadu, Pakpe region, the 4th is Gulf of Mannar, 5th is Gulf of Kutch in Gujarat. Because sighting a dugong in Gujarat is very, very difficult because population is very low. So how can then identify the critical dugong habitat? So my researchers actually look into the indirect evidences for presence of dugong. One of the indirect evidences is their feeding trail. You can see some of the feeding trail marked by my students. And these are the trails we monitor using a various technology, advanced technology, and then map them, and then we identify the critical habitat so that these critical habitats are focused by the forest department and other stakeholders like Coast Guard, Marine Police, so that concentrate there, because we know that dugongs using that area. So let us focus there and do something good and prevent or remove the threats which occurs in the critical habitat. We did it the same mapping throughout the country, either in Gulf of Kutch or in Park Bay region. The reddish color is a very critical habitat of dugong in Park Bay in Tamil Nadu coast. And also we did it for entire country, including Andaman Nicobar. All critical habitats have been identified, mapped, threats are identified, mapped, and we know all the problems what we are facing it. And after doing this exercise only, we recommended to the government of Tamil Nadu to declare the Park Bay or some portion of the critical habitat of the dugong as a dugong conservation reserve, protected area. I'm really happy to announce here is, although we proposed 3 years before, and recently, a month before, the government of Tamil Nadu in Assembly, the Honorable Chief Minister declared the first dugong conservation reserves of the country in Tamil Nadu. So now the process on how to manage it, this conservation reserve. So they declared about 400 square kilometers C as a dugong conservation. It's a critical mating habitat of the breeding habitat of the dugong in Tamil Nadu. This all outcome of the research. And we do monitoring, because people always ask me how many dugongs we have it. Because the 250 individual is a guesstimate. It is a guess actually. Nobody, so far I haven't done any estimate, proper estimate. So we are struggling to do that, because counting a dugong in a vast sea very difficult to do that. So we are using several techniques, using drones, aerial survey means aircraft, a drone, underwater drone, acoustic technology. And in fact, my next speaker, Mr. Karthik, is also interested to work with us in acoustic technology. So, and then also we are using a genetic techniques to estimate the population. And we do a lot of boat survey conservation method. And the boat survey may not be in a good survey method to estimate the marine mammal, but still we use this survey because we hire about 20 to 30 fishing boat. And we invite those fishermen to run the boat for 20 kilometers whole day. So it is not only counting a dugong, we are looking for a dugong. So we use this opportunity to educate the fisherman community. So we always conduct a mass boat survey method, so that if we come across a dugong, well and good. Otherwise, the message is passed on the fisherman community that the dugong needs to be conserved. These are some of the pictures captured by my students using drones, aerial drones. We use different kinds of the drones to monitor and estimate the population. And we realized that we can estimate, come up with the estimate of the dugongs in India by using this technology. Very soon we are going to release the count of the dugongs in India. The most important program, as my previous speakers all mentioned, that we have to work with the community, we have to educate the community. The awareness is the key in marine mammal conservation, which we realized, because we informed the government people that don't kill the dugong, but poor fishermen wouldn't listen to us. The reason is they are very poor. They live in poverty line, below poverty line, and the dugong actually give them some kind of money. One dugong may fetch them about a huge money, which they are unable to leave it. So then what we did it, after unable to convince this guy, then we approached their children. We realized that the fishermen children are not continuing their studies till 12th standard. The reason is in 9 to 12, there are a lot of major dropout from the government school, because mostly they study in a government school. The children are dropping out and they're joining with their parents for a fishing. We realized that we should help these children to continue the study. So we launched a new program called a Dugong Scholarship Program. Those children, the fishermen children who are studying in the government school, which are very located in the dugong habitat, are selected for the Dugong Scholarship Program. We pay them 500 rupees per month for 2 years continuously. And if they are qualified, then we will support them. The 9th, 10th, then 11th also we will support them till they complete the 12th standard. So right now we have 585 Dugong ambassadors. We call them our ambassador. Through this Dugong ambassador, because what we do, we will organize some kind of a program, awareness program, one-day program for these kids every alternative month. And these children become our messenger. These children actually carry the messages to their parents who are fishing in the Dugong habitat. And because of that, we got amazing research in our country. The parents are convinced the people who used to kill the Dugong for a meat or money stopped killing it, and they actually become turned to be a savior of the Dugong. And one good thing happened in our country. And second good thing is the children actually continued to study till 12th standard. Amazing. So this is a dual benefit we got it because of this scholarship program. This is an incentive for the Dugong conservation that reached to the community back. So we given to that thanks to the Ministry of Environment and Forest, Government of India, who actually generously supported us this particular big program. Apart from that, we have a very strong network, youth network. We have about 1,000, more than 1,000. They are diverse. They are fishermen, they are college youth, or maybe from Marine Police, Navy, Coast Guard, whatever. There are many, many youth we have it. So my students are actually networking with these students, connected. And these networkers actually helping us in identifying, locating the Dugong population, assessing their population, understanding the problems there. Any poaching incident also informed by this volunteer. So that it was passed to the Forest Department. Then Forest Department successfully stopped those poaching incidents. For example, these pictures are sent by our volunteer network. Whenever they go for diving, if we have a small camera, nowadays everybody having a camera, they click the photo, sent to us. So using these pictures, so now we are trying to estimate the population of the Dugong. Plus, the Dugong stand in that, some because of the board heat or DC, some various reason. These animals are standing all along the coast, especially in the 3 states. But we don't know, because even my students are 3-4 students in each state. They cannot patrol the coast every day, impossible. So these volunteers are actually informer. Whenever any animal stand, not only Dugong, any dolphin, whales, porpoise, even a sea turtle, whale shark, anything stands, these people actually inform us. So my team immediately rush there and then do some post-mortem and all those things are there. We also undertaken one study on the genetic, because we realized that what's happening to the population, because in the smaller population, the genetic inbreeding depression happened, then it is not good for any smaller thing. So we want to check it. We realized that we studied that, we found that Indian Dugongs are genetically better, no need to worry. But one interesting thing we got is that Indian Dugongs are unique gene and also carrying an ancestor gene. So that is something interesting things happen in that. So it is all again prove the point that Dugongs might have originated from India and migrated in either direction towards South African side or towards Australian side. But we had to confirm this because we need a further study. But time being, our preliminary analysis proves that Indian Dugong genetically unique in nature. So that is something interesting, and also genetically they are safe, no need to worry. And then while you're doing this study in the National Action Plan, we didn't visualize the one problem called a host net. Host net, maybe the people from Goa might be aware of this, because host net is the biggest problem for even the fishermen. I remember the fishermen in India always complain that a lot of host nets are there in the sea. That net is actually disturbing their fishing activity. The same host net which is fallen in the seagrass birds are detrimental. Actually, it is actually killing the dugongs in our country. So this problem we have to remove it. Thanks to Marine Police, Coast Guard, and Forest Department. In the 3 states now, we started with the help of the youth college students, and we are now started removing this host net from the seagrass habitat so that dugongs can happily come and feed, not entangle in this particular net. Capacity building, as I mentioned earlier, because this is the 4th objective, we have to do it as part of the National Action Plan. So we train, because Indian Forest Service officers are largely trained for managing the terrestrial biota, not in the marine biota, which we realized that. So we initiated, Wildlife Institute of India, with the help of the ministry, initiated a special program for Indian Forest Service officers. We started way back in 2014. Already we run 11 program for them. We trained more than 200 Indian Forest Service officer in the coastal habitat, how to monitor and conserve the marine mammals in our country. And apart from the forest officer, we also trained the fisheries officer, Coast Guard, Navy, and Marine Police. So we are building. And not only that, in fact, we are also training the youth also in underwater monitoring, because this youth can be a tourist guide in the future. So we are actually training those people also as a part of this capacity building program. Yeah, awareness, as I mentioned earlier, we use various media, whether it is a national media or local NGO. So because awareness is the key, we have to keep on telling the people the importance of biodiversity, importance of keeping the environment neat and clean. That's a key there. So far, as on today, we could reach about 75,000 people who are in our volunteer network. Right now, we could reach them with a various program. We developed various education materials. We also adopted certain education material written by various other authors. The idea is to educate the people. So these education materials are different category. The school children, for school children, we had a separate set of material. Teachers, we have a separate set of material. Public and media, we have a separate set of material. And then researcher, because we publish all the papers in our good journals. Then managers, for example, forest officer, fisheries officer, we have a guidelines manual how to manage those marine habitat so that the marine mammals are taken care. And also we have a lot of action plans for conservation of marine biodiversity. So this program, we are running the 6th year of the program. This is the video, it's the outcome of our program. You can visually see this fisherman, the dugongs have got entangled in their fishing net. These are the same fishermen once upon a time used to kill this animal for a meat and sell it for a market. But now they are very happy to release them, and happily releasing them, and they are very happy. And these fishermen, after releasing it, we honor them actually. It's not giving a lot of money. We give them a small incentive, especially we honor them. We invite the district collector or the highest officer, rank forest officer in that area, organize a small meeting, and then we honor them. So next day, their images are carried by the local media and we project them as a hero. So that helped us. So far we could rescue about 40 dugongs. I can monetarily say that, I shouldn't say as a scientist, but still for a convenience of the common people, I can always say that 14 dugong, each dugong can contribute 2 crore rupees. That means 14 means 28 crores per year. So we are already crossed 5 years. That means how many, more than 100 crore rupees we could save. That is with the help of this fisherman. The money which we have spent already is less than 10 crores in this program. So this is what the incentive, that return we get because of the conservation. So this is a classical example how we done this marine mammal conservation in our country with one person. But the story is not ending. Not all the species are as lucky as dugong. So that is the reason our Honorable Prime Minister committed to the global community that India will take care of the Indian coastal and marine ecosystem and the biodiversity that are living in this system. Thanks to him, because of his leadership, and he launched another important program called Project Dolphin. Under the Project Dolphin, we are planning to cover all the marine mammals, that is about 35 species. And plus, it's not only ending in the marine mammals itself. Although we consider the marine mammal, we are planning to consider all the entire marine biodiversity under the umbrella of this program. We are still working with this action plan developed already. We already shared it with all the concerned state government, including the government of Goa. We already had a discussion with all the forest department, fisheries, and various stakeholders. Very soon, this program probably launched by the government of India. These are some of the species. This plan has identified all the threats occurs pertaining to the marine mammals in our country, whether it's a fisheries bycatch overfishing, pollution, global climate change, boat strike, noise, habitat, whatever. All these problems are identified. And it also having a 7 goals. One is we have to conserve the habitat of the marine mammals in India. We have to conserve all the marine mammals and improve our understanding. Means science, data, as our secretaries have mentioned. Data collection is very important. Data, very, very important for a better planning. And then we have to, it is not only the conservation. When you're doing it, our Honorable Prime Minister is very particular about enhancing the livelihood with the sustainable tourism. He wants to generate employment using this program. In the name of tourism, mariculture, and all those things, we have to do it. Capacity building, of course, we have to do that because we are very poor in capacity building. My next is third speaker, Dr. Mirdulla Srinivasan, well aware of that. She has been helping us in various aspects because she was one of our always the consultant ready to help us to come up and taking some decision. So we know very well, we are very poor in marine biodiversity research and conservation. We have to build a capacity, and also some legal problems we are facing right now that needs to be addressed. And also we need help from the neighboring country because marine mammals, most of the species are migratory in nature. One day they live in India, another they live in our neighboring country. So we have to join hands and help this migratory wonder life in the world. So as I said, the problems right now we are going to give a priority is the bycatch, because our estimate shows that some of the researchers from CMFRA would estimate about 10,000 marine mammals are getting killed by fisheries interface, means they are accidentally entangled. There is no use of this animal. People won't eat it. So they will actually, when they entangle, fishermen has to either cut their neck or cut that animal and release. So the animal died and they throw the carcass. But my estimate is more than 20,000 individual per year we are losing it. So we have to do something on priority. We have to stop these bycatch businesses. Why we are doing the bycatch businesses? Because we are moving. We know that blue economic. The moment we talk about a blue economic, we look into the fisheries output. We have to promote, enhance the fishery resources. We have to harvest as much as possible, means capture fisheries. And we developed a technology, thanks to Indian scientists. We come up with a lot of advanced technology to capture more fishes. But unfortunately, one way we could increase the capture fisheries, but unfortunately, this technology also detrimental to the some species like marine mammals. Now we have to see, we need more capture of the fisheries. We need a good technology, but the same technology also should help the conserving the marine mammals. So that's very important. But we are not addressing that issue. That's why this particular project Dolphin, we are going to give the first priority to the bycatch mitigation measure. We already estimated the budget. We know how to do that. It's a very expensive program. We need help from the fishermen and various state government, especially the trawling fishermen. We are very soon going to launch that, and hopefully we can minimize the bycatch of the marine mammals in the future. Because when we solve this problem, we are actually almost 50% of the conservation taken care. Because the major issue for marine mammals in our country is the bycatch. So we have to stop that. And the second thing is, when you talk as bycatch, there are gaps in the data. That is what the government of India recently released a guidelines for marine megafauna standing management. These guidelines actually help us to get the data on the marine mammal standing report, and also give some guidelines to prevention of the marine mammal standing, how to prevent it, how to handle it once the mammal standed on the shore. Another thing was given. Again, I thank the Dr. Mirdulla because she was also helped us. Then another, my colleague from Gujarat, Dr. Dibani Sutaria, she also helped us in developing this particular document. Then after addressing that animal as a species, we have to look after their habitat. So recently, IUCN, that Marine Protected Area Task Force, in which I am also part of that, with the help of the Indian experts, we could identify 7 IMA sites. IMA means Important Marine Mammal Area. It's a globally recognized site. So India is bestowed with such a 7 sites. You can see the blue color. You can see that where is the Goa also. So these are the blue color area where right now we identified the important marine mammal area, and the coastal, along the coast of Goa also identified as one of the important marine mammal area. Because based on the literature, we could come up with this, and we have to take care. Right now, these areas are neither protected nor conserved, except few locations. But majority of the areas are not protected, not taken care. Now we have to do something now. That is what this Project Dolphin is looking for. That when we want to protect this habitat, it shouldn't affect the livelihood of the community. So without affecting their livelihood, in fact, it should promote their livelihood, and we should take care of the marine mammals in our country. That is the strategy now we are going to follow. For that, we already prepared a roadmap for managing this critical habitat of marine mammals in our country. We know very well that any protected area or any area which is having a regulation on the fisheries can help improve the fisheries in outside that protected area. That is the role of marine protected area. So if we small portion of the sea, if we protect, not allowing fishing there, so fish can breed, because we cannot protect all there. We have to identify the critical marine biodiversity area in which it is a more conducive for the breeding habitat of the fishes. It's a good for marine mammal, good for sea turtle, other animals. And if protect it, then the fish can safely breed there. When the fish breed in that area, then the fish spillover takes place around that area. Then fishermen can go and catch the fishes. So that is what the role of marine protected area. We can. So in that background only, we identified immersites can be one of the important habitat which can help the marine mammal as well as livelihood of the people. Second, we also identified the important coastal marine biodiversity areas all along the coast. We identified about 106 sites. Of these, about 40 sites are actually important marine mammal area, which we recommended Government of India to do something. Already some of the ICMBS sites have been declared as a protected area. We too have the Convention of Biodiversity already identified one class called ecologically or biologically significant areas in the marine environment. In Bay of Bengal, we identified one such a big area, more than 1 lakh, that is 100,000 square kilometer area. This area identified for the olive ridley, but this olive ridley abscess site also holding a good diversity of marine mammal. Although we don't have much information, we have to work in that area. But when you talk about the marine mammals, which I already given you one example of Dugong, based on the experience from the Dugong, we developed a Project Dolphin conservation document. And then we realized that again, same experience come from the Dugong conservation, that in a Dugong, we actually joined hands with the various stakeholders, various departments, lot of NGOs, lot of stakeholders. That's why we could get some success, but we had to go a long way. We haven't reached a success. We have to go another 20 years. We have to work continuously. I may not be here in this institute, but we have to work. After 20 years, probably any Indian can see Dugong if they go to Tamil Nadu or Gujarat or Andaman. That is my dream. I want anybody visit Kalpap Mannar or Park Bay or Andaman or Kalpap Kutch should sight a Dugong there, at least in next 20 years. That is what my dream. But for that, many people have to join hand and work. But Project Dolphin, Project Mammal, any mammals, marine mammal conservation, all ministries, several institutions should join hand. We are already Government of India in negotiating, talking with the various ministry and various institutions. The dialogue already initiated. Everybody actually, the good thing about Indians is everybody want join hands with respect to conservation. The conservation of biodiversity brings the people together. Actually, that's the one good thing about Indians. So everybody's shown a positive note right now. So we are hoping for the best. The one last slide I want to mention here is, I always says that we need a good area needs to be protected in the marine environment. It's called a marine protected area. It should be managed properly, but it shouldn't affect the livelihood of the fishermen. I underline the same point. Protected area, we need it, but same time, it shouldn't affect the livelihood of the fishermen. I call them as a blue investment. I call them as a long-term fixed deposit in the name of protected area. So that the future generation, because the Government of India want to do a lot of development program in marine environment. It's a good. This development program helpful for the present generation, probably the next generation will benefit. If we want the future generations should benefit, then we should actually protect some area as a marine protected area. That is going to be the long-term investment for our future generation. With these notes, I thank once again to the Cornell College as well as Goa Biodiversity Board for giving me this opportunity. Thanks a lot.
Dr. Preeti, if you just allow me a couple of minutes, I'm sorry for the interruption. Dr. Sivkumar, an amazing presentation, an extremely comprehensive science of the dugong in particular, and it was a treatise come a treat for everybody who's logged in on your views on the dugong as also the other marine mammal species. I think we have been very fortunate to have a man of your stature and erudition as an expert in the area of marine mammals to be a part of this webinar, and we are very grateful to you. On behalf of my institution and also on my personal behalf, I convey my gratitude and appreciation. As a convener, I would also like to place on record the great encouragement that we have received from Shri Kunal, IAS, Secretary, Department of Environment and Climate Change, who was kind enough to accept our invitation to give the opening remarks. I'm not very sure if Kunal Sir is still logged in. But of course, this event would not have been possible without his proactive support, encouragement, and whatever it takes to make this conference possible. It was an absolute yes from Kunalji. So thank you once again. And I think, Shiv Kumar Saab, you have got quite a few questions from the listeners, which have been tapped in the audio, the chat box. But for your convenience, I request my colleague to kindly read out the questions to Shiv Kumar Sir, and maybe you could take a few of them which are pertinent. Thank you so much. Very kind of you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Shiv Kumar. Am I audible to you?
Yes, madam. Yes,
yes.
please.
Sir, yeah, thank you so much for such an informative talk about the status of marine mammals, especially the dugongs in India. And there are quite a few questions for you here. We have a question from Shahnawaz Khan, who asks, can we think of breeding the dugongs in a human-controlled environment program similar to the captive breeding program? Is it possible in India?
No, it is not possible, especially with respect to dugong, because dugong breeding behavior is very unique. So far, we don't have much success. We tried government of Japan keeping the dugong in captivity. In fact, India also in almost 30 years or 40 years before, Center for Marine Fishery Research Institute in Mandabam in Tamil Nadu tried to keep some dugong. The problem with the dugong is feeding them. They need a special food, the seagrass. And even if you keep them, they may not breed properly because their mating system is called a lake mating system. Lake mating system in sense, the group of males choose one location, start displaying that. The female visit that area and choose the best male and mate with them. And then the female settle down in that habitat, which is secured for the young one. Such kind of system environment we can't provide in the captivity, one thing. Second problem is the calf need a special food and a special care, and this animal also very shy. That's what even in the aquarium maintained by the government of Japan, unable to keep the dugong alive not more than 6 months. So we can't take a risk of captive breeding. We no need right now. That's what still I have a confidence that we can do this program in in situ conservation. We can do that. But if at all, if we want to go for a captive breeding at a worst case scenario as a last resort, then we should have a huge aquarium, or we should have a kind of a exclosure inside the sea, in the habitat of seagrass, natural aquarium, marine aquarium, in the natural habitat. Make sure that few dugongs are put it inside, male and females, good combination, and then remove all the problems so that they can breed it. It's not a purely captive condition. It is a semi-captive condition. We may try as a last resort. Thank you for this question. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I think that cleared out the doubt very nicely. Sir, there's another question by Paras Pal, who asks, how can seaweed cultivation affect these mammals? I suppose this is artificial or anthropogenic seaweed cultivation. Can it affect these mammals and dugongs in particular?
Seaweed is, see, we have two kinds of seaweed. One is native seaweed. India is really, again, we have rich diversity of seaweed or sea algae, we can call them, about 800 species of seaweeds we have it in our country. And these seaweeds may not be harmful if the seaweed growth is enhanced due to high nutrient or pollution. That's a different aspect. Otherwise, the seaweeds are not determined to the marine mammal, because marine mammals have been living in the same environment, seaweeds are there. But I think you are talking about the exotic seaweed, the invasive species, Capopicus albercusi, that is introduced in the coastal area of Tamil Nadu. We are worried about the seaweeds. Actually, we are not happy with the culture of, say, exotic species in Indian Sea. We shouldn't encourage any invasive or any aquatic, even if it is not invasive in nature, any aquatic exotic species in our marine environment. It is not at all a good for a native biodiversity. It will have its own adverse impact. May not be now, maybe in future. But the seaweed, exotic seaweed culture in Tamil Nadu affecting our coral reefs. In turn, it may affect the overall richness of the biodiversity in that region. In that way, we know, but we don't have any study to link the seaweed culture with the marine mammal. We don't have anything. As for the dugong concern, I haven't seen any impact so far.
Okay, thank you, sir. We have a question now about, I think, about diseases and premature deaths. So, Sir Prashant B asks if there are any diseases leading to premature dugong deaths, and if there are there any measures used for monitoring or treating them? So, like for example, parasites or some other diseases causing premature dugong deaths.
Yes, thank you for this question. Again, another interesting question. Very unfortunate that we don't have anything for this particular subject. Neither we understand anything about marine mammals diseases, or we don't have any capacity to handle those animals which are infected with the disease. Very unfortunate. That is the reason now we are actually promoting. In fact, we are trying to organize some kind of capacity building program for our Indian veterinarians with the help of Australian or Malaysian veteran who have some experience working in a marine mammal diseases. But it's getting delayed. Unfortunately, COVID came in last 2 years. I couldn't organize this training program, and hopefully I'm planning to do it within a couple of months, inviting large number of veterinarians from all along the Indian coast to train them. But right now, unfortunately, we are very, very poor in this particular subject. We don't know anything about this.
Okay, sir. I think it's a bit sad, and maybe this can be an opportunity for us to have an area of research. Maybe we could do something like that. So areas open up for the potential research topics here. Nagore Quintano asks, which are the dugong's natural predators in India and how common are they?
For a dugong, natural predators we not encounter. The one main natural predator I can say is a man only. Somehow we are managing that. And the other natural predator, probably the sharks. Some of the sharks can kill the calf. Or we have orca also. Some of the orca can be determined, may kill the dugong. But calf is more vulnerable. Calf can easily be attacked by the various species of sharks. These are some of the predator. Otherwise, there is not much predator for dugong. The man is the main issue, major problem.
Okay, there are so many questions for you, sir, but I think we'll have to cut short on a few because I think for lack of time, I'll just ask you one.
Karen,
yes, sir.
Karen?
Yes,
Karen,
sir.
Apologies. I think there's a question from Somadas Sarkar with
yes, I was getting to that.
Yeah, please kindly,
Yeah.
kindly do.
Somada Sarkar has asked whether microchip-based tags have been implemented on these mammals to understand their migratory patterns, and also if these microchips can be used to track them and prevent them from being caught by fishermen.
Good, actually. That's a very good point. In fact, we didn't try this. The reason was personally, I was also involved in the tracking of the dugong in Gulf countries also with my colleague, because we shared a lot of experiences. Based on the experience from Australia as well as in Gulf region, the satellite tracked animals not survived for long period. Right now, Indian dugong's population very smaller in age, so that's why we didn't try. But right now, I'm getting a micro satellite chips to use in this animal, because especially I'm more interested in looking the movement pattern of the dugong between India and Sri Lanka, because Sri Lankan government also putting a lot of effort in conserving the dugong. But based on the traditional knowledge of the fishermen of this region shows that the dugongs are actually moving between these two countries sea. So we have to work together. That's what important. But for that, I need some concrete evidence to prove that. So now very soon, probably next season, we will do that. It's a good suggestion. In fact, we didn't do it in the last 5 years. Reason was, let us bring back population, don't touch the animal at first to go. But we already touched 14 dugong. And unfortunately, again, we didn't tag them again, those 14 dugong, because our priority was release them as early possible, don't handle the animal. But now we do that, because now we are very quite comfortable in handling animal. And as well as the dugong population seems to be increasing. So hopefully we will take up this kind of studies in the next phase. Thank you very much.
I think there is just one more, Shiv Kumar sir, and that should be the last one, Karen. And that's coming from Nityanandan Manikam, who wants to know what is the current status of the standing stock of Halophila ovalis, which he argues is a major source of food for the dugongs.
Yes, excellent, Dr. Nityanandam. Actually, you are correct. Halophila ovalis is seems to be one of the favorite food of dugong. But unfortunately, this is a particular species occurs in a sparse manner. We don't know the reason. There are other grass species actually dominate wherever they are occur. But these ovalis occurs in a very shallow water, but in a very low quantity. I haven't estimated the total standing biomass. Hopefully by end of next year, I may be in a position to come up, because the biomass of the seagrass varies between the season. So I need more data to come up with the average biomass, annual biomass of this particular species. But we know there are about 480, 500 square kilometer of area in not a dominant grasses, but they are most favorite grass species of dugong. Thank you for this question. And the good thing is you are also attending this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for addressing so many questions. I now hand it over to the next speaker that we have. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, for moderating the questions. And sir, I completely agree with you that citizen science is an integral part if we want to conserve these lesser-known marine mammals. An interesting fact about marine mammals is that they have an amazing ability to hold their breath while they dive in cold, dark waters, hundreds of below the surface. Communicating underwater is challenging as light and odors cannot travel, though sound travels 4 times faster in water than in air. Marine mammals often rely on vocalization to communicate, navigate, avoid danger, and locate prey. Bioacoustics is a rapidly developing science that combines biology and acoustics that involves production, dispersion, and reception of sound in animals. To educate us further, we have with us Karthik Ashok. Karthik is a marine mammal researcher with over 4 years of bioacoustics research experience, with a focus on marine mammal ecology and use of conservation technology to help monitor and mitigate current human-made threats. He is currently undertaking his Masters of Research with the Centre for Biological Diversity, Scottish Oceans Institute at the University of St. Andrews to study sperm whale acoustic detection off the coast of southern Oman. As a part of his broader interests, he advocates for open science, open source, and cost-efficient conservation tech for regional stakeholders. I invite Karthik to present his views on bioacoustics and cetacean conservation. Over to you, Karthik.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for bringing me onto this webinar, and thank you for the organizers and the patrons at Carmel College for organizing this. I shall be talking about bioacoustics and how it is an important monitoring tool with marine mammal conservation. And so I'll just share a slide over here that could help. Let me just show you. So if everyone can see the slides clearly.
Yeah, it's visible, Karthik.
Thank you. So my focus on bioacoustics is because I was interested in looking at animal sounds in particular, and not just cetaceans and marine animals, but in birdsong as well as with bats, that could help us actually look at how animals communicate and how they also perceive the environment around them. So this is why I've focused into this particular field. And before I can go on to explain what bioacoustics is and how soundscapes matter in the marine environment, I'll tell you how it actually, I was influenced and how I took this journey into bioacoustics. So I started off very early in my career as an electronics engineer and majoring it in my undergraduate degree in electronics and communications engineering. And as a part of it, we also had to look at something called signal processing, which looks deeply into the physics and the electronics of acoustics. And this interested me in looking at how sound is produced and how sound travels. But at the same time, I thought it would be, I was more interested in conservation of biodiversity. And growing up in Chennai in Tamil Nadu, it was really important that I could be one with the biodiversity around that you can find. So that's where I started volunteering with the Madras Crocodile Bank Trust and helping them with a lot of public engagement. At the same time, I noticed that they had these underwater systems that could help, that underwater recording systems rather, that could help communicate how the sound is in their enclosures. And this would be communicated to the public. And I was helping them record these sounds as well. And that's how I got into bioacoustics and looking at how environments, even in those tanks, can matter and how the sounds can help. So later on, I had started working with this organization in Greece called Archipelagos. And that's where we started a bioacoustics program. And the project had lasted for more than 3 years and it's still ongoing. And where we had monitored the cetacean populations in these islands that you can see here. And this is where there was a lot of cetaceans, right from the common-nosed dolphins to sperm whales and even beaked whales. And we use these hydrophones to record them. And these are the picture that you can see here is a hydrophone array that we deploy at the back of a boat, and we tow it around the boat to monitor these animals along with visual surveys. Fortunately, this helped me look into the anthropogenic threats as well, such as underwater radiated noise, which we were able to look at how it affects other animals, such as Delphinus delphis, which is the common dolphin, and the striped dolphins. And I'll come to how they affect them later on during the talk. And further on, I moved to Oman to actually see how the Indian Ocean region works, particularly the northern Indian Ocean. And this is where we were conducting surveys of Oman exactly when COVID hit. And thanks to the people at the Arabian Sea Whale Network and the folks in Oman, I was able to continue with this MRes at University of St. Andrews, where I'm currently doing my research. So the focus of this talk is quite broad. I'm going to keep it broad as well, because we do have to look at the soundscapes and understand how sound plays an important role. And I'm going to keep it more generalized for everyone to perceive how it actually happens. And with a specific focus on the Indian Ocean region as a whole, this would help people understand that the seas and the marine ecosystem are all connected. It's not like how we have boundaries on land, but these are all connected, and one ecosystem can also have an impact on it, and sound especially can have a major impact. So moving on, sound in the ocean itself is a totally different place than what we humans are used to. It may look empty, it's deep, it's huge, and most of it is dark. And what you're seeing on your screen right now is basically what many marine mammals and cetaceans look at, especially the ones that dive deeper into the sea to search for their prey, or to even traverse through their waters. And what do you usually do when you enter a dark room? You might turn to your next best sign, which is hearing. And that's why whales world and even many organisms in the ecosystem is just a system of sound. So what I can show you next is how sound is actually categorized according to soundscapes. And according to Soundscape Ecology, it is categorized into geophony, which is all the natural sounds that you can get in your everyday environment, right from thunder to the waves to earthquakes especially. And with earthquakes, let me just play a little sound that you actually hear in the ocean. And that can actually listen to it under the sea, and it's quite loud. But you see that even the earthquakes are at very low frequencies over here. They go from 10 kilohertz all the way up, 10 hertz all the way up to 100 hertz. And the next ones would be all the natural sounds that are made from biota, which are all the living organisms that you can see. And it doesn't matter, it is not just marine mammals. Everything right from shrimp to sea urchins to fish, even seagrass meadows, they make a little, you can detect sounds just from their bubbles that they make. So this is a sea urchin that is actually moving in on the seafloor, and you can detect their sounds as well. And that's how sometimes researchers, I think in Canada, are able to study them. But of late, after the industrial age, many of these sounds are made by us humans. So humans have been, we've been around on the oceans for 200 years now, but more during the industrial age, with the age of shipping and industrial development, we are able to produce a lot of noise as well in the oceans. And that's why it is important to know what type of noise we are producing. For example, with big container ships, we have a propeller noise that keeps going on, and it's always continuous. So this, imagine this, but it is multiplied by say 100 times or more. You can hear it throughout the oceans in our present day. And then sometimes you can also hear Navy sonar, which is quite evident right now, when we have a really strong Navy and defense presence. So this is what it sounds like. And all of these sounds were, I'm showing you these examples only because these are just a fraction of what is actually present over there. Because according to us and our perception, which is our hearing, we can only hear between 20 hertz and 20,000 kilohertz. And that is in the most perfect sense. The older you get, the smaller that range becomes. But then with all the biophony, they can go all the way from 10 hertz, which is what we call infrasound, all the way up to 100,000 hertz, where, for example, the finless porpoises, they communicate at up to 100,000 hertz, and that is out of our hearing range, and that's what we call ultrasonic sound. So you can imagine the other sounds that are also there apart from this. And not only do you take in the frequencies as well, you take in the time and the way sound travels through the space in the oceans as well. Knowing that it takes some sounds are able to travel for far distances. For example, with ships, the lower frequencies can travel for hundreds of or even thousands of kilometers. And because some elements can keep traveling around the globe as well, they stay within the ocean. The higher frequencies, they can dissipate, they can go away, but the lower frequencies are still there. That's why on the figure on the right, you can see that shipping sound can be there for decades, whereas whale song, for example, most of the elements at the higher frequencies can dissipate, whereas the lower frequencies can keep traveling for hundreds of kilometers. So that's how scientists these days, they are able to detect whale song from one part of the world onto the other, especially with blue whale song. So narrowing down on my focus with marine mammals, I'll talk about two in particular, which is the mysticetes and the odontocetes. So what you have here is a humpback whale song. That is, I think everyone knows what a humpback whale song can sound like. And it might, to some people, it might sound eerie, and to some, it might sound beautiful. But I think it's important to study humpback whales as well as all the other mysticetes, otherwise called baleen whales. So with baleen whales, their songs and their vocalizations are at very low frequencies within our hearing range, or sometimes, for example, in blue whales, they are at even lower frequencies, less than 20 hertz. And these are frequencies that we cannot hear, but they can. And they are able to travel for tens and hundreds of kilometers as well. Most of the vocalizations these days are categorized into song and non-song. When it comes to song, we still are hypothesizing the function of song, whether it's mate selection, or if it's about male dominance in between individuals. So this has a critical role in how we understand these animals as well. And the non-song, which is individual patterns of vocalizations, can be a social calls between mother and calf, for example. So the research is still going on for this, and I think in the next few years there'll be more answers for that. But my main focus is on the odontocetes, which are fascinating type of marine mammals. They include the dolphins, the large whales, as well as the porpoises. So when it comes to odontocetes, they have typical types of vocalizations, especially three. They're categorized as, for example, there are the click trains, there are burst pulses, and there are whistles. The burst pulses and whistles are mostly used for social communications, and sometimes the burst pulses are used when they are threatened as well, when they are interacting between groups. For example, this is what a burst pulse sounds like. And whistles, which are at the lower part of the spectrum, right around even 4 kilohertz, they go all the way up to 22 kilohertz in most times. They are used for social communication, but also for individual identification. There is still a lot of research going on as to what their purpose is, but this is an example of how a whistle sounds like. It is quite peculiar. This is a whistle. It is whistles sometimes, especially in bottlenose dolphins that you also find around the Indian coast. They can be used as like a thumbprint. So every individual dolphin can have an individual whistle of its own, like a name, and that's what they call as signature whistles. And what this can be, this is how they can identify individual populations using acoustics, individuals within populations using acoustics. And this is a quite interesting subject that the folks here in St. Andrews are looking into. Next, I mentioned clicks. But I would like to also emphasize on how clicks are used. These are not just echolocation clicks, but rather they can be used in social instances as well. Let's look at this diagram over here of how the dolphin anatomy is. Basically, they have these nasal sacs over here, and the dolphins are able to release these clicks through these nasal sacs through the front part of their head, which is called the melon, and that actually amplifies the clicks and focuses it onto its prey. So clicks, when they are used for echolocation, just like bats or sonar, they actually look at the prey and they target the prey. And as soon as they come closer to the prey, the clicks get faster and faster. And then a series of echolocation clicks is what we call a click train. And when it gets really short, it sounds like it is one continuous sound, and that's what we call a buzz. For example, this is the click of a sperm whale. And then it's getting closer and closer. And then it becomes a buzz. So this is how sperm whales, especially the deep divers such as sperm whales and even beaked whales, they are able to look through their environment at great depths. Some of these whales, they can dive from 1,500 meters even to 3,000 meters. And two years ago, they found a Cuvier's beaked whale that could dive for 222 minutes. That's almost 3 hours without, 3 hours on one single breath. So this is fascinating, and how they actually dive is a fascinating topic to look at, and how they control that breath, along with how they even focus their clicks, is a field that people are looking into right now. So the last of the marine mammals that are more relevant in the Indian Ocean region are the manatees and the dugong. Of course, Dr. Sivakumar sir has mentioned about the dugong and how they are quite threatened, and they need more attention in Indian waters. Similar to that, the manatees have been researched upon in, say, in Florida as well as in Africa, and they've looked at the vocalizations of them. Unlike the dolphins and the odontocetes and the mysticetes, the odontocetes, the dugongs have a very short vocal range from 0.6 kilohertz to 16 kilohertz sometimes, but it is to 16 kilohertz, but it is very short, and they are very shy creatures that way. So detecting them through acoustic monitoring can also help as a tool. And similarly, I think dugongs can also be detected and monitored in Indian waters, for example, in Park Bay, the Gulf of Mannar, and those sides especially, so that we can, using 2 or 3 more hydrophones in a single space, we can actually localize where they might be. And there are so many other tools that can help in this research. Another fascinating point is that since they are the genetic make of the dugongs in India are quite unique, they might also have different vocalizations than the other ones, because when you look at vocalizations of animals in particular regions, they might differ from place to place. So that is an important point to consider as well. With the next part, that is a manatee that you can hear of Florida. And this is where I said that they have very short vocal ranges. And this particular call is when a manatee was actually harassed, and this is like an emergency call that it was emitting. So it is also important to listen to their calls as well as what's happening around them to look at their threats. And speaking of threats, we have our most immediate threat in terms of acoustic, which is made by humans, us. And there are a lot of anthropogenic sources in this case, right from shipping, where the marine traffic in our areas are huge, and they lead to a lot of noise pollution and continuous noise pollution within the sea, to seismic exploration, where lots of oil companies and they drill in deep into the sea to extract oil, but they need to also find where the oil is. So they use these air guns that blow really loudly, and that really causes a harmful impulsive effect on marine mammals, especially the deep divers. A lot of other anthropogenic sources such as coastal development, acoustic deterrents, and pingers are also affecting their hearing. And this can lead to populations just avoiding places sometimes, but also they can become deaf. That's where the effects of noise are also quite important to study. So there are four main effects that happen based on this. One is behavioral changes. So when it comes to behavioral changes, for example, when sperm whales and pilot whales, they stopped vocalizing completely when there was a study of some sonar in a Heard Island feasibility study. And in other cases, based on research on behavioral responses of beaked whales to Navy sonar, scientists developed a risk function that actually predicts that half of the individuals in that population stop foraging at all. So that changes the behavior as well. The next one is with masking effects. When I say masking, it is like when someone's speaking over you and you have to talk louder. That's where the masking or the Lombard effect comes into play. So this can be detrimental when it comes to individual to individual communication or group to group or group cohesion, when amongst marine mammals they have to actually vocalize louder, and sometimes they can't vocalize after a point of time. So when there is a lot of noise in the background, this can make them stop vocalizing all the while. And this is what I had done a study on in Greece, where a lot of anthropogenic noise next to a high risk shipping channel was making the dolphins not only vocalize louder, but also change the frequencies at which they vocalize. So some of these anthropogenic sources can also cause them to lose hearing, where it can be temporary sometimes or permanent. And most of the time when it becomes continuous temporary hearing loss, it leads into permanent hearing loss. And that's what they call temporary threshold shift and permanent threshold shift, TTS and PTS. And that leads to them being disoriented, and in many times they get stranded as well. So this is an important case that that has to be looked at when it comes to human-made noise, especially. Now let's look back a little at how noise covers entire frequency spectrums. Like, for example, when the cetaceans, the whales, the low frequency whales, as well as the high frequency dolphins, all of these shipping noise, the air guns, the dredging, they cover their entire frequency bands as well. And this doesn't help with marine mammal protection and marine mammal conservation. They are entirely affected by all this noise. And so different rules and regulations can be brought into play in this case. Now let's move on to the Indian Ocean region in particular. And when I mention the Indian Ocean region, it is quite vast. It is definitely a big place to consider, with 70 million square kilometers in area. And the number of countries it is surrounded by, where it is quite a lot of number, and it is open in the south, whereas it's closed off in the north. But then it's all both while many folks, both governing and non-governing bodies, look at maps like this, I prefer to look at maps like this, where it's all connected, and you have to look at the environmental factors of the ocean, especially the bathymetry, the way the ecosystems behave, and how the continental plates drop off pretty close to the east coast of India, and they are pretty shallow on the west coast. And similarly, all of these bathymetry close to the Arabian Sea, they can help make a major upwelling, and it also affects how marine mammals choose to reside and how to migrate. So that is important when it comes to looking at marine ecosystems as a whole as well. So with this, I'd like to give a couple of case studies too, based on how acoustics can play a role in this huge ecosystems, because visual detections can be tough when you're going out on a boat, and it takes a lot of effort and manpower as well. But then with passive acoustic monitoring, where you either keep a recorder in the water, or you can tow a hydrophone at the back, you can listen to an area that is larger than your visual observation. So that's why detection and classification is one important feature that acoustic monitoring can help with. So example, migratory species, the big whales such as blue whales and humpback whales, they are mainly migratory except for the Arabian Sea humpback whale, but many of the populations are migratory. And if you want to look at where they're coming from or where they're going, acoustics can be a really good tool to look at this. Same thing with cryptic species. So cryptic species, when I mention cryptic, it means how species that can't be identifiable because they are not very visual. For example, the beaked whales are a good example, because they keep diving most of the time, and once you're close to them, they just disappear. And so they produce really unique vocalizations and clicks that can help us identify that this is the species. Residential patterns and seasonality is also important, where where passive acoustic recorders can be kept for long periods of time, and you can see when the species or the populations are coming back and using those regions. That's why this could also help in having an estimate of which regions, especially spatially and both in time, are major hotspots around the region, especially, for example, what they did with the stranding network over here in India, and they saw spatial temporal hotspots around India. Similarly, we can see spatial temporal hotspots of marine mammals around India through acoustics as well. So this is something important to consider and bring up. Let me take you to a case study over here with how detection and classification of species through acoustics could help actually make an estimate, or actually separate two populations of blue whales. So the Northern Indian Ocean blue whale was actually thought to be one entire population, but based on the song that they recorded of Oman over here in the Western Arabian Sea, down south in Madagascar, and in Chagos, which is in the Central Indian Ocean, they were able to see that this song differed majorly from what is thought to be the Sri Lankan song type in Sri Lanka. And even recently, Divya Panikar had also recorded the Sri Lankan song type in the Lakshadweep Islands. So they were able to separate out these populations. And you may ask why this is actually important to study these populations. But before that, let me show you a recording of what the song actually sounds like. Now, this recording has been sped up by 20 times because the frequencies are so low that you can't hear them. But if you speed them up, the frequencies become higher. And if you see the time scale, on the x-axis over here, you can see that each song can last more than something less than 60 seconds. And that is quite long for one continuous vocalization as well. So this was different from the song type that is recorded in Sri Lanka. And it also informs people on, such as intergovernmental and governmental organizations, on the populations that are around in the region. Because if you actually look at the shipping traffic that can be there, it is a lot. You see by this map over here, the shipping traffic is heavy, and in many cases blue whales are actually affected in ship strikes and ship collisions rather, and that's how they die most of the time. So when you actually tell intergovernmental organizations like the IWC that there are populations that are separate, they can actually look at laws to help reduce shipping lanes or make them more concentrated in particular shipping lanes rather than more vast. So this is important to consider from a conservation perspective. And I believe more action can be done in this area as well. And secondly, when it comes to marine acoustics and bioacoustics, you also have to look at how you can estimate some human threats. One of them is dynamite fishing. So dynamite fishing, although it might not be done a lot in India, especially it happens a lot in Southeast Asia and West Africa as well. And it is very bad for our ecosystems and for environments, especially when they keep fishing with that practice. It can degrade a complete ecosystem where the corals or the seagrass meadows cannot rejuvenate after a while, and this causes dead ecosystems to a whole. And not only for the ecosystems themselves, but it causes auditory damage to the marine mammals that are around. So there is a lot of these cases around the world, and there are small cases in India. Luckily, some of the laws are there to help, but in many cases such as Malaysia and Tanzania and West Africa, there are they are they were unregulated for quite a while. And that's where we can go down to Tanzania, and a case study over there that actually helped not completely resolve this issue, but actually helped monitor this issue. So in 2015, there was a study that was done where they used a towed array behind a boat to monitor not only cetaceans, but also the blast that happened from this dynamite fishing. So when they did that, they noticed that there were a lot of blasts within a 31-day survey period itself, exactly 318, and that is a lot when it comes to detections. And the blast can have a range of 12 to 50 kilometers too. So it can have a very wide impact. And when you see on the left, over here on the map on the left, you see that there are many marine mammals also present in that area, and they had detected acoustically that there were marine mammals. At the same time, they had also detected that there were many blasts in those areas, and this could have affected a lot of them. And it still continues to affect to this day because that program is still running, and they are able to look at when exactly the blasts are made. So over here in 2018 and 2019, you could see that in these red dots, that the blasts were taking place continuously in different different regions. So this is also a recording of one of those blasts. And this blast happened right next to the recorder. And if that is quite intense for you, imagine for marine mammals and cetaceans that actually look at their environment through sound. And this can actually impact them in such a way that imagine yourself going blind for like a minute, and slowly your vision comes back. So imagine this happening several times during the day. So putting this into perspective, they had to come up with a solution for a monitoring program in Tanzania. And with that solution, and also using the help of local stakeholders, engaging with the fishermen, they were able to help enforcement agencies focus on identifying and intercepting the vessels that were actually doing this. And at the same time, the blast also reduced. So this was a good conservation effort on their part, and bioacoustics also played a major role in this. So with that said, when it comes to bioacoustics, it's not just a good monitoring tool, but sometimes you have good advantages to it because it's number one, non-invasive. You actually don't have to go interact with the animal directly. You just have to record them. It's a good ecosystem monitoring tool as well, since it not only monitors the animal, such as a dolphin or a whale, but also what is surrounding them, whether there's noise, whether you can also look at fish monitoring and how the environment is. And also the periods of monitoring can be much longer, and you don't have to be there as well. For example, when you lay down an acoustic recorder, as I said, you can keep it for 1 year in certain recorders, and this can help you give continuous data. That is one good reason why people use acoustics to monitor marine mammals. I've already explained about spatial coverage, where they look at a larger region instead of a smaller one. But then there are certain uncertainties also when it comes to the spatial coverage, because you have to look at where exactly it's coming from. And lastly, it's a really good monitoring learning tool. For example, like how I'm showing you now the sounds of different animals and in marine mammals. The same thing you can also show school kids and the public how marine mammals actually communicate. So this is quite useful when it comes to bioacoustics in marine mammal conservation. But it's not the end solution, because there is no one size fits all solution with this. You can have a few answers, but it's not the entirety of it, because sometimes you need genetics as well as other techniques like photo ID to help you assess populations and to help you with the conservation objective you have. There is a lot of uncertainty as well when it comes to when it comes to science, especially in acoustics in the water. So there are different statistical uncertainties that can help stakeholders such as policymakers actually make rigid policies for reducing anthropogenic threats. And when I say stakeholder engagement over here, it means that you do need stakeholder engagement in conservation of marine mammals. You do need the public as well as the locals to also help in this conservation. And that's why you have to understand how the ecosystem has a role where sound can affect a lot of things, right from how the receivers, such as the marine mammals, can look at sound, and how you are also contributing to it. That's why there are different noise exposure criteria in the EU as well as in the US, where they have come up with these criteria to actually mitigate these threats. And I believe that over here in India especially, you can do that. But there needs to be more monitoring work for it. So in that case, I would like to end with a really nice image of what it used to sound like and how it currently is in this present day called the Anthropocene, as they like to call it. And what if it is a poorly managed future? You can actually have a lot of reduction in coral, and there is a lot of shipping traffic that can contribute to even seagrass meadows deteriorating, because whole ecosystems can collapse because of sound. And because even the absence of top level predators to the most bottom level foragers can be affected by it. But if we have a well-managed future, there is possibilities of us having a sustainable acoustic environment, and that can lead to better marine mammal conservation. And with that, I'd like to thank the organizers again for this really helpful webinar in conservation. Thank you.
Well, Karthik, let me, as a convener of this international webinar, convey to you that I feel extremely proud that a young researcher of Indian origin is doing some exceptionally good work in the area of bioacoustics. I think you took us on a journey of submarine symphony and noise with, great illustrations, both, by way of your spectral analysis as also the phonetic substantiation. So thank you so much in the first place for having accepted our invitation, despite the fact
thank you.
Quite a lot of your data is kind of classified and very sensitive. But despite all these hurdles, the fact that you accepted our invitation and made a great effort at demystifying and making it sound so lucid and easy, despite the fact that it's a very complex area of physics of sound, and especially the way we can make use of this expertise in furthering our mandate of conservation of marine mammals. Thank you so much. God bless you. And I think Karen can take over now. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for Karthik. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your amazing presentation, including all the sounds. And there were quite a few questions which you ended up answering in your talk itself. So I'll just look at some things which are out of that purview. Dr. Manoj has asked a question about has an acoustic signature catalog been prepared for marine mammals in any country where they would reside? Anything like that has been done?
When you meant, actually, that's a good question, because for example, on the west coast of the US, they have signatures of species on a species level, where they could see that different beaked whales have different types of vocalizations, and that's where they could classify them. So in a particular area, they have the entire catalog of it. But this is because the work has been done there for over 40 years as well, and there's a lot of knowledge of it. So that is one prime example where you could say there's a catalog. In the other senses where you actually identify marine mammals within India or the Indian Ocean region, I think there needs to be more research for that to happen.
Okay, thank you. Another question is by Savio. He says that whale songs are arranged in phases and assembled in themes and varying durations. Can we use this research and further research to develop any warning sounds that can be used to kind of warn them that a ship is coming or something like that?
I think that is quite a far-fetched question, because if you're warning them, in any case, you have to actually look at how their let's say their song or those units, what they play, let's say what role they play within their so-called language or dialects. So I think people are starting to begin in that research, especially with humpback whale song, and from there you might possibly take it into interspecies communication, but that is still a far-fetched research subject, and it can be quite tricky as well.
Okay,
so
fine. Yeah.
It's not yet there, but I can't really answer that question.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, there is a question from Loveson Edward. Has any study on the use of bioacoustic for marine mammal population estimation being done? Can we use it for population estimation?
For population estimation, when it comes to abundance and densities, yes, in certain ways you can. If you combine it with visual surveys as well and acoustic surveys, yes. I believe Isha Bopadikar on the west coast of India, she's trying to do that right now with the Indian Ocean humpback dolphins and the finless porpoises as well. So there have been lots of estimations being done in the Mediterranean and in the UK as well, where they could estimate how many sperm whales are in an area when it comes to abundance and densities. And for example, on the survey I was on with the ACOBAM survey initiative, we took transect lines using something called distance sampling. We could estimate how many cetaceans there are, but there is always a bit of uncertainty there. That's where you have these statistical uncertainties. So I think I answered that question. I hope so.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sure that that has cleared it out. So I think we can move on to our next speaker. Thank you so much, Karthik. It was really
Thank you
an
so much.
amazing
This
talk.
was really
Yeah.
great.
Once again, thank you so much, Karthik. It was really a very informative session. Our last speaker of this event, we have Dr. Mirdulla Srinivasan. She is the director of the Marine Mammal and Turtle Division of the NOAA's Southeast Fisheries Science Center. She has a doctoral degree in wildlife and fisheries science from Texas A&M University. Previously, she has earned dual degrees from Florida Tech and zoology and molecular biology from the University of Delhi, India. Besides the Marine Mammal and Turtle Division at the Southeast Fisheries Science Center, Mirdulla is interested in investigating the ecological and social determinants of animal decision-making as it relates to their distribution, habitat use, foraging, and social behavior, and species interactions at the community level. She is especially interested in predator-prey interactions involving social predators and investigating the ecological and evolutionary consequences of anti-predator behavior and effects of human-caused and environmental stresses, including climate change on marine mammals and marine ecosystems. She is also actively involved in supporting marine mammal education, research, and stranding response, especially in India. Mirdulla joined National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration as a 2009 Sea Grant NOS Fellow at NOAA's Research Office of International Activities. She currently serves as Society for Marine Mammalogy Education Committee Chair and Women in Marine Mammal Science Initiative. Mirdulla is passionate about ocean literacy and mentoring the next generation of marine scientists, especially the underrepresented groups. Over to you, Mirdulla.
Thank you. Can I do a sound check? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here.
Yeah, it's visible.
That's perfect,
See it?
Dr. Mirdulla.
Okay. All right. Well, good morning from me here, and good afternoon and good evening to you there. So first of all, thank you very much for having me. And I was asked to talk about cetacean diversity and conservation challenges in India. So I'll do my best today to walk you through some of these. I'll start with giving a marine mammal overview. I missed some of the earlier presentations, so I don't know how much was covered. However, I just thought I'll give you a quick primer on that and then talk about some of the techniques for studying marine mammals in terms of why we study them, how we study them, and how it's used. And then I want to talk about marine mammal ecosystem roles, a reason why we care about these marine mammals and why we have these extensive research programs and conservation programs. And the last part is sort of the conservation threats and solutions that exist. So this is just a taxonomical classification of marine mammals. They all come under the class Mammalia, and they're distributed across 3 orders here. And we'll go into a bit more detail in the next few slides. So marine mammals are long-lived species. They are slow-growing. They have high adult survivorship, which means they live for a very long time, and the adults have long survivorship as long as there is no mitigation factors. They mature late, and they usually only produce one offspring every 1 to 5 years, sometimes even longer, depending upon perturbations in the system and intrinsic issues. The most important thing, of course, is they are quite vulnerable to heavy human impact, and especially whaling. So a lot of the whales are now recovering, but they did experience huge population level impacts that they are still reeling from or recovering from. And with respect to dolphins in particular, they do have very complex social structures and parental care, which makes it really complicated when you're studying their behaviors. Now, there are about 89 species of whales, dolphins, and porpoises. In general, right now, there are about 131 extant species of marine mammals, of which 89 are whales, dolphins, and porpoises. There are also 4 species of manatees and dugongs. The Steller sea cow is extinct. And there are about 33 species of pinnipeds. Obviously, in India, this is not an issue. We also have sea otters and polar bears, which are classified as marine mammals. Polar bears in particular are dependent on the sea for food, and so that's why they fall under the sort of the marine mammal category. Again, 2 things we don't have to worry about too much, particularly polar bears. In India, there are 30 species recognized, and almost all of this information comes from stranding data and opportunistic sightings, as well as some historic data. Most of these species are distributed both in the coastal environment and the offshore waters as well, but our knowledge of offshore cetacean species is very, very limited. Most of our knowledge comes from the coastal studies, particularly there's a heavy focus on Indo-Pacific humpback dolphins, Susechinensis in Colombia, and Ganges River dolphins. And lately, there's also a lot of interest on Arabian Sea humpback whales. But a lot of the studies that have occurred are on some of the coastal populations of dolphins. Now, cetaceans can be classified into 2 suborders, mysticetes and odontocetes. Mysticetes are baleen whales, and odontocetes are toothed whales, and we'll just go into a bit more detail in the next few slides. Now, whales are one of the largest animals on the planet, starting with the blue whale, and they're the largest of the baleen whales, or mysticetes. And among the toothed whales is the sperm whale, which is the largest, and among the dolphins, the killer whale, which is the largest of the cetacean species in terms of the dolphins. Now, baleen whales are easily recognized by the 2 blowholes, which is on the top of their head, and females tend to be slightly larger than males. They're usually pretty solitary, but they have short cooperative foraging behavior in association with other whales, as well as with seabirds. They exhibit long migrations, which is seen with gray whales and humpback whales between the breeding areas and the feeding areas. So they do undertake a long journey, which is pretty consequential from the ecosystem point of view, and I'll talk about that later on. They tend to be low frequency species, so they do communicate over larger distances, and because they're solitary, this is again reflective of this sort of more longer range communication. And they do feed on small schooling fish and krill, even though they are one of the largest animals. With odontocetes or toothed whales, which includes your dolphins and whales and porpoises, they have one blowhole on the top of the head, which makes it easily recognizable. Killer whales and sperm whales are sexually dimorphic, which means that killer whales, the male killer whale is very distinctive. Similarly, the male sperm whale. And at sea, it's easy to distinguish them because of that dimorphic nature. It's more pronounced in these animals compared to some of the other dolphins. They do have strong social bonds, and there is a very well-organized system where you have alliances between the male species as well as males and females. You have mothers, fathers, grandmothers. So it's a quite an established family unit. And it can vary in terms of the type of associations that occur. Most often, it's sort of a fission fusion society where animals come together for brief moments to engage in social behavior, foraging behavior before dispersing. But the social structure is a very strong characteristic of these animals. They also are known for their sophisticated cognitive abilities in terms of being highly behaviorally plastic. They can adapt to different environments, whether it's a nearshore environment or the pelagic environment, the shelf break. They occupy different habitats, including reef habitat and deep ocean. And so there is a lot of behavioral plasticity in terms of also what they feed on in the water column at the surface or subsurface or deeper waters. And they use sophisticated acoustics to echolocate, to find food, but also to avoid predators. And so they, like Karthik was saying, they do see their world through sound, and they use it pretty effectively to communicate, to find food, and to avoid predators. Unlike the baleen whales, dolphins tend to have more mid to high frequency communication, and porpoises in particular have much more high frequencies which they communicate. So what can we learn from studying cetaceans, and how do we study them? Apart from acoustics, there are other ways we tend to study dolphins, and particularly we use something called as photo identification. And this is the use of this involves taking photographs of the dorsal fins, or the flukes, and some kind, as well as markings these days, to better identify or individually identify within animals within a pod. And this has been really was initiated probably in the 1970s and much earlier for killer whales as well. And it's easier to distinguish these animals, and it's kind of like a fingerprint, which allows us to sort of track these animals over a period of time. Photo identification has been used for a wide variety of things, from population studies to social associations, particularly understanding the social network structure, and also understanding, relationships, familiar relationships across species, across a particular population. The other techniques that are available are quite wide these days. There's so many of them. I've just listed a few of them, but we have everything from tagging or telemetry data that allows you to monitor long-range movements or short-range movements. Some of the tags developed are invasive, but some are also non-invasive, which allow you to give you short-range movements. There are also different platforms for studying cetaceans. You can use the smaller boats if you're working in the coastal waters or nearshore waters, and much more aerial surveys and shipboard surveys, which allow you to go into deeper waters or cover a larger area. In some cases, we can also do shore-based studies, and this has been used widely. And that allows you to use a theodolite to track animals from the shore from a high vantage point. And it's a great way to look at habitat use and movement patterns, and to some extent behavior. And of course, Karthik has talked to you about acoustics, so I won't dwell too much into it. And the most, I think, also there's the biopsy aspect, which is the genetic studies. And these days it's gone beyond just analyzing population structure. It's also looking at contaminants, stable isotope studies, which allow you to look at dietary specializations and where they forage at the trophic level, as well as monitoring other toxic compounds and hormones and things like that. More recently, we have made a lot of advances in the type of non-invasive sampling techniques, and hexacopters, you probably, if you Google it on YouTube, you can see a lot of these videos. But these are these small drones that we can send out from a fixed platform like a boat or something like that, but not very far, typically around 1 kilometer or so. You need that line of sight, but you can use it to look at the body condition of animals, take measurements, morphometrics, and also even assess reproductive status in some cases. So it's a very effective tool. It has its limitations in terms of environmental conditions have to be perfect to make it happen, and the conditions, water conditions, also have to be pretty clear. But it has been very effectively used these days to monitor species and to get some additional data which you wouldn't get from just visual surveys from a boat or from a ship or an aerial platform. Sail drones add an additional advantage in that they're also environmental samplers, and they're driven by wind, and so they cover large areas, and you can fit a lot of sensors in them to help combine data, whether it's prey data along with sightings data in terms of predator presence, and also gather a lot of the environmental variables, which can help give you a much better picture of how animals are using their habitat and how conditions vary from one place to another, and also understand sort of the seasonality of how things are shifting with respect to prey and predator, but also environmental variables. So it's been a very effective tool. It has its limitations like everything else, but I just wanted to give you an example of things that people are slowly looking into. There's also very high resolution satellite imagery, and there are much better cameras now available that allow you to take high resolution pictures, including thermal infrared pictures that allow you to distinguish between warmer blooded animals and their ambient surroundings. But and they can be used for abundance as well as just monitoring as well. More recently, and this is really picking up steam, is eDNA, which is environmental DNA. And this involves just sampling water in and around the species in question. And sometimes it's deployed from ships, but sometimes you take it from the small boats. And environmental DNA is a nascent science. It's still being developed, it's still being tested, and a lot of the applications these days involve looking at presence absence of this particular species, and there are species-specific primers that have been developed that allow you to detect a particular species. And the sampling procedures and the way the water samples are processed has also advanced quite a bit, so making this a much more tenable or usable alternative. And also it has been useful to just sort of understand biodiversity or how diverse a particular area is. And so there are a lot of applications for eDNA as the technology develops, and as we get better at developing primers. And also combining it with other information, whether it's the acoustics data, as well as visual survey information. The key thing is not any one technique is in itself perfect. You need that sort of holistic or integrative approach that allows you to combine a variety of techniques and put the puzzle together in terms of how the animal is using the environment, when and where they occur, how they're using it, and why they occur. What are the reasons for being in one area in spring or winter? So a lot of these techniques help that. The other most useful data source is strandings data. And in India in particular, this has been used quite widely to gather a lot of information of cetacean occurrence. And in general, strandings involve an animal is considered to be outside its natural habitat. And this includes animals that are stuck in areas that, in rivers or in creeks and things like that, because of, issues that may, because of storms or because of some kind of disorientation. Now, it's very difficult to sort of assess what is the exact cause of stranding, but in a lot of cases, there are a variety of natural and human caused reasons, and this includes your diseases, pathogens, contaminants, and as well as predators, as well as human activities like sonar activity, but it is hard to definitively establish the cause of death or stranding. And so often we have to collect a lot of data, both morphological data, but also necropsies to better sample the tissues and get a better understanding of what could be the potential reason. So it's a pretty established way of looking at causes of death, particularly reasons for human-caused mortality, and also helps with understanding what species occurs. It's one of the easiest ways to collect data, and more often than not, animals show up dead than they do live. But it is, if you don't have a very well-established research program, it is definitely a good source of information about cetaceans in the area. I won't dwell too much into the stranding response aspect of it because that is a presentation in itself, but I will share with you some resources that will allow you to have a better understanding of how stranding data is absolutely critical to monitor the health of populations and to understand how humans or the environment is affecting populations within a particular area, including climate change. So in general, all these techniques help to capture different aspects, ecological and biological aspects of a species at different scales. So depending on the technique, depending on this research question, you can have a better understanding of populations at the local, regional, or at a very large marine ecosystem level, like the Bay of Bengal, for example. So why should we care? Now, there are more and more studies coming out, and this is still in its infancy. We're still trying to piece together all the information. But recent research suggests that animals, particularly whales, are able to sequester carbon dioxide, which is something called as a whale fall. So when they die, they sort of bury a huge tons of carbon dioxide. And they're also trying to look at it from an economics perspective of how much is one whale worth in terms of tourism, as well as the ability to transfer or move nutrients in the water column, but also across oceans, and particularly limiting nutrients like iron and nitrogen, which they carry up to the surface, which enhances phytoplankton productivity. And there's also the tourism industry, which is perhaps the biggest component of the blue economy, and it is rapidly growing all around the world. And but it is not a benign activity, but it does show that whale watching has a significant contributor to the global economy. And this is just a summary of all the roles that whales do play in the ecosystem, and how it's important to not just look at them from sort of a cultural perspective or just the conservation perspective. It helps to broaden the conversation a little bit in terms of understanding the role they play in the ecosystem and why they are effective ecosystem engineers. Now, marine mammals do have an impact on the ecosystem. They are animals, and they do remove a huge amount of prey, whether it's krill, fish, squid, and in the case of killer whales, they also attack other marine mammals. And they do have impacts on other predators of their prey. So, seabirds and sharks are other animals that could be impacted. And they do drive evolutionary responses in prey, particularly in terms of prey developing anti-predator responses to changes in predators, particularly killer whales. They have the potential to restructure food webs, and this is still not well established, or there are not enough studies. The most famous study of all is the relationship between killer whales, sea otters, sea urchins, and kelp beds. And it is one of the most iconic studies ever done. And it shows that marine mammals are capable of, by eliminating sea otter populations, that in turn affects the sea urchin, the kelp vegetation by increasing the population of sea urchins, because sea otters consume sea urchins. So there's a lot that we still don't quite understand in terms of the food web dynamics. And part of the reason is it's very hard to study these animals. They do occur at sea, and for the most part, we don't get to see them all the time. So we only get snapshots of information, and therefore a lot of what we do is speculative, but by collecting data over a long period of time, we are able to piece together some information which gives us a better understanding of how these animals use the environment and how they impact the food chain and the marine ecosystem as a whole. But let's all recognize, and I think we all do, that the marine ecosystems are highly perturbed, which means that there is just an ever-increasing use of the ocean environment for different reasons, whether it's for energy extraction or for trade, or mineral extraction for any type of resources, as well as human traffic. So there is a lot of ships on the water. So populations are recovering right now from commercial exploitation, which is the whales, and we are seeing changes in the food webs in terms of collapsing prey populations, and in some cases when marine mammals, because of fisheries interactions or because of other confounding factors. The planet is also warming, and we know climate change has a huge impact on some of the ecosystem conditions that exist today, and I'll briefly talk about this in the threat section. And fisheries continue to grow all around the world, and they do have an impact on not only the prey populations, but also on whales, particularly dolphin populations, and in both direct and indirect ways. Now, so animals also have to engage in decision making, and this is, I think, the most critical aspect that needs to be sort of understood is these animals survive in the environment by, making sure that they can find food and maximize their energy intake, but at the same time, they have to survive. So there is a cost associated with finding food, searching food, consuming food, particularly in terms of avoiding predators. And this is sort of subsumed in the optimal foraging theory. But animals are constantly engaged in a sort of trade-off of trying to see if they can acquire food without getting eaten. And so within this sort of decision-making system, it can get compromised when you have other extrinsic factors, particularly human cost activities, that can disrupt this already quite tenuous link that animals have to follow. One of the greatest threats in the past was, of course, whaling, and there was intense hunting pressure combined with habitat loss that led to a lot of large mammals, both on land and at sea, to go extinct. More recently, we talk about bycatch as being one of the most acute threats on cetacean populations throughout the world. And it's not just in India, it's everywhere. And this is the non-target take of non-target species, which are caught incidentally. In some cases, they're released, but in some cases, they do get entangled in gear. And so they can be released with injuries, which lead to death, but not instantaneously. Now, in the Indian Ocean, we have very little information. Bycatch is still very, it's not studied that well. We still have limited data on it, but there are studies that were recently done by Anderson et al. That show that about 60,000 cetaceans are killed annually in the Western and Central Indian Ocean. And there are other studies that look at cetacean bycatch based on landings and interviews. But our knowledge of how much the overall cetacean bycatch in this region is very poorly documented. So we don't really quite understand how many animals are dying from fisheries interactions directly and indirectly. But we do know that there are gears in the water that have a potential to incidentally catch marine mammals. And these includes everything from drift gillnet fisheries to pelagic long lines, and in some cases, purseine fisheries as well, and fixed pot gear. So the key thing with bycatch is that you have to remove that spatial temporal overlap. So obviously animals are choosing areas that are rich in prey, and fishing in the fisheries industry is also choosing areas where it's productive. And sometimes these collide and do not work well for both entities here. And a lot of the efforts have gone into reducing fisheries effort or modifying fisheries behavior, because we can't really change animal behavior, but we can try to remove some of the elements that do affect their behavior. And then there's, of course, modifying gear and changing fishing practices and just understanding how animals use their environment, where they occur, what are the hot spots, what's the seasonality, how they use the water column in terms of their diving, and when and where they do that. So all of that information taken together, and also understanding the population dynamics, how abundant a species is, where they occur, how they're distributed, what the demographics of the population, can all help in reducing bycatch. The other aspect is also marine debris and gear entanglements, and this is a huge source of concern, according to me. There is a lot of degraded gear everywhere, and it does have a huge impact on these animals, because they tend, once the gear gets entangled in the animal, it's a slow death. It's a chronic cause of mortality, because the animal is dragging those nets with it, and it prevents it from surfacing, from consuming food, and it essentially starves. It cannot feed its calf. If it's a female, it gets entangled. So it can be quite complicated in terms of the entanglement issue. But there is hope, particularly with fixed gear. There is a huge initiative underway, particularly in the East Coast and the West Coast of the United States, in developing ropeless fishing technology, which is the elimination of the vertical lines. And that helps to prevent, particularly right whales, which is one of the highest causes of mortality for them, is entanglement and then ship strikes. And by eliminating that cause of mortality, we give them a chance to actually get out of sort of the population decline they exist in. So this is still being evaluated and tested, but there are a lot of industries or companies that are getting involved in this, and it has, I think, a positive outcome, not just within the United States, but elsewhere as well. The second most important threat, I think, not just in India and globally, is climate change. And in the past, it was sort of this unseen force that we sort of knew that the environment was changing, but we didn't quite see the visible results. But now we are seeing it, it's a much more stark and evident. Blue whales, for example, are arriving much more sooner, which then puts them right in the middle of ship traffic, but also fisheries. And this leads to both ship strikes as well as entanglements. Same with right whales. They followed their prey, they moved up north, but that has led them to have higher levels of interaction with the fisheries, snow crab, pot fisheries. And so that has led to more entanglements, as well as also increasing their risk for ship strikes. And we're also seeing that El Nino has an impact on prey availability, particularly krill, and that has an impact on southern right whales. So it beyond the sort of the polar bear and sort of this ice-associated seals, as well as Arctic species, we now can start to document effects of climate change on other species. And it's not happening directly, but it's sort of an indirect effect where the prey is impacted and the animals are reacting to shifting prey. and that has led them, put them at higher risk. We're still sort of understanding the impacts of climate change and predicting how animals are going to be shifting their distribution. But this is still something that we are trying to understand. Unless we have a long time series of information, it's very difficult to disentangle all the different reasons for why animal populations decline or why they're responding in a certain way. The last one in my book, in terms of my perspective, is ocean noise. The ocean is a very noisy environment, and I think Karthik talked to you about it a lot. And we have both acute and chronic sources of noise. And this can have a huge impact on this acoustic space in which these animals live in. And we are seeing animals are modifying their vocalization patterns and in terms of, and also how they're using habitat and how they're communicating. And more, as there's more interference in the acoustic communication, it can affect how they find food and how they avoid predators. And so that has a huge consequences on these populations. And in general, it can also cause physiological effects and lead to strandings. So there's a huge aspect of the ocean noise that it remains to be mitigated. And so there are efforts underway everywhere. You know, we're establishing criteria, but also finding technologies, noise quieting technologies in ships, as well as understanding animal movement patterns, where they occur, densities, and developing models that allow you to predict, you know, where these animals are in, or occur and have a propensity, which areas they occur, have a propensity for, and sort of reducing the sort of noise levels in those areas or minimizing ship traffic, for example, in that particular area. So mitigation is the only way out. And as we continue to pursue a blue economy, we have to find solutions, and we are. So some of the challenges and some of the need to overcome some of these issues include building research capacity. Particularly in India, you need that student pipeline. You need students who have an interest in marine science, are educating themselves, in not only marine mammals, but the marine science in general, understanding both the theory, but also understanding how to collect data at sea. There is a need for collaboration and coordination among different entities across jurisdiction. There is a tendency to operate within jurisdictions or within the construct of a particular ministry. But because of overlapping jurisdictions and because animals don't see boundaries, there is that need to have collaboration and coordination, and not just among government entities, but also non-government, university and NGOs and independent researchers. So that there needs to be a coalition of the willings, for lack of a better word, to look at conservation problems and attack it together. Another critical piece that's missing is data sharing, access, and public dissemination. Data that is collected must be shared, has to be made accessible to the public, and needs to be disseminated through peer-reviewed outlets, as well as, you know, through established or vetted websites. And that is very critical to help in advancing the research, but also sharing information so that we are not duplicating studies, but also not creating redundancy. There are some excellent legislative and the legislative and regulatory framework in India is pretty rigorous compared to many other nations. But protection without privileges is an issue, and that means a paradigm shift. So it's not enough to sort of blindly protect a species. It's to ensure that all the factors that are limiting that species survival are mitigated or at least assessed. And then mitigated, so that you are not only protecting the species, but you're also removing sort of the stumbling blocks or issues that are impacting recovery of that species or the conservation of that species. So legislation has to go with sound policies and guidelines, but also science-based conservation. And science is something that's universal. What we study in Europe or US or India, it's the same. The methods are the same. The data collection techniques are the same. The interpretation can vary a little bit, but ultimately the scientific techniques are pretty standardized everywhere. So that is something that it should not be compromised on in terms of how data is collected, how it's analyzed, and how it's shared. And you need to have that peer review to make that happen. The other aspects of it are equally important, and that's that holistic approach. In countries where you have ecosystem impacts or shared resources where you have multiple marine users, you need to have that holistic or interdisciplinary look, and you need to have the stakeholder participation in sort of the decision making. And with blue economy rising everywhere in the world, marine tourism, fisheries, energy, coastal development, all of these need to be looked at a lens of not just supporting the development of these sectors, but also assessing what the impacts are and how to mitigate those impacts. And participatory modeling and interdisciplinary approach can help tackle some of these things. And lastly, I think scientific exchange and collaboration is very, very important. I've been involved in, along with several colleagues, both in India and in the US and elsewhere, in having these workshops where we are bringing people together, we are facilitating training, education, capacity building. And I think a lot of important players are involved in it. This is another tool I just wanted to share when I spoke about stranding response, which this is just one of many tools available, but it can certainly give you a good idea of what to do when you see an animal, what kind of information you need, and why training is so essential. Last, I wanted to say that it's not all is not lost. And I think in India there are a lot of conservation projects and initiatives underway. And also regionally, and I think these are all good efforts that will go a long way in addressing the conservation issues in India, but also elsewhere. I leave with this point that I really want to make is there is a need for ocean leaders and champions. Not everybody has to be a marine mammal scientist, and not everybody needs to be in the field to make a difference. We need to be more educated about the oceans. We need to understand how these animals interact with the environment. And it can start early. It can start as little as in the middle school, your high school, undergraduate and graduate levels. And you need to educate yourself, and you need to champion. Just like on land and climate change, if you have champions, we need champions for the ocean environment. And as we have develop more leaders, we will see a change. We will see a systematic change in how animals are studied, managed, and conserved. So I leave it with that, and thank you very much. I wanted to thank Dr. Manoj and Preeti for inviting me, and I will answer any questions if they're there.
Thank you, Mirdulla. Hi, Mirdulla. This is Manoj. Thanks a lot for having accepted our invitation in the first place. And I regret any inconvenience on account of the time zone difference. I understand it's early morning out there in the United States, but I'm extremely grateful that you accepted our invitation, and you have given us a very interesting presentation, cutting through various dimensions of marine mammal conservation. For me personally, the takeaway, Mirdulla, has been that, you underpin the fact that science is universal and the beneficiaries are global. And what also impresses me in your presentation is that you kind of concur with our mandate at the Biodiversity Research Cell that academics and informal portals of creating awareness is an important instrument of conservation. Thank you so much. God bless. And I'm sure you will connect with us in future as well, as and when we come up with something of mutual interest to you. God bless. And over to Karen. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mirdulla, for your amazing session. We have a few questions for you from Dr. Manoj itself, first of all. Have all cetaceans been subjected to conservation assessment by the IUCN? And do such assessments reflect in country-specific legislations, and such as the IWPA in 1972 and subsequent amendments?
So the IUCN, a lot of the species, yes, they have profiles, and we do have information for some of the cetaceans, but it's highly variable. So a lot of the data-rich countries, obviously, like Europe and the US and Oceania, Australia, New Zealand, there is a lot more information in some pockets of the world and a lot less information in other parts of the world. And so there is considerable data variability in terms of how cetaceans are assessed or how much information we have. And in India, definitely there is a need to have those systematic studies and do those surveys and first document what's there and then understand how the biology and ecology are changing. But in India, there's also the ecosystem role and sort of the ecosystem connections with, the coastal environment and coastal communities. So all of that has to be sort of integrated as well compared to some other regions.
Okay, thank you. There is another question, I think, regarding to the ropeless fishing that you mentioned that has been going about in the east and west coast of USA. So Loveson Edward is asking, do you have any idea if any Indian agencies or NGOs have tried to or successfully implemented this ropeless fishing program?
I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know. It's a fairly new technology and it's still being tested and evaluated. It has shown tremendous results, but implementation is hard. There are several things. It depends on the fishery, and it's particularly for fixed spot fishery and fixed gears, and so therefore its applicability has to be evaluated based on the fishery, and also in the US we're still evaluating it, and it's not being fully accepted everywhere. But it holds tremendous promise. I think eliminating vertical lines from the water column is a huge I think benefit for animals that are using that area. Right now, it's kind of like a mangrove forest. I mean, if you can imagine a mangrove forest under the sea for an animal to navigate through, and it gets wound up on every line, that's the kind of world they're living in right now. So once those lines disappear, or at least minimized, or in areas where they don't, if whales occur in a certain area and you minimize these lines, you're giving them a much better chance of survival. So that I think it's a great tool, but we still haven't evaluated it fully, and implementation is challenging.
Thank you so much. I think we have finished with our questions. There was amazing talk and very informative. So thank you once again, Mirdulla. I'll hand it over now to Preeti.
Thank you once again, Mirdulla. It was a really informative and wonderful session. I would now like to call upon Andrea D'Souza to express a word of gratitude. Participants, kindly note that the link to the feedback form has been sent in the chat box. Please fill it.
Good evening to one and all. It is my pleasure and privilege to express a word of gratitude and appreciation to everyone who has contributed to the success of this international webinar on the diversity and conservation concerns of marine mammals. We express our gratitude to Professor Shiva Kumar from the prestigious Wildlife Institute of India. Your partnering with the Biodiversity Research Cell of Tamil College is an excellent example of intellectual synergy in capacity building of stakeholders. Also, big thank you to Karthik Ashok of Center of Biological Diversity, Scottish Ocean Institute at the University of St. Andrews, and Dr. Mirdulla Srinivasan, Director of the Marine Mammal and Turtle Division at the NOAA's Southeast Fisheries Science Center. We thank Shri Kunal, Officer of Indian Administrative Service and Secretary of Environment and Climate Change, Government of Goa. We also acknowledge Dr. Pradeep Sarmukadam, Member Secretary of Goa State Biodiversity Board, for partnering with us and for their logistic support. A word of gratitude to our institutional authorities and principal, Dr. Sister Maria Lizen of Goa's premier institute of higher learning, Carmel College, for their constant encouragement and support. Our special thanks to our head of the department and convener of today's webinar, Dr. Manoj Bodkar, for collaborating with the Goa State Biodiversity Board and Wildlife Institute of India and meticulously planning this webinar. A word of appreciation to our organizing secretary, Dr. Preeti Pereira, for all the efforts in ensuring that the webinar is effectively organized, and Ms. Karen Braganza for moderating the session. My sincere appreciation to the technical committee, Ms. Vinita Dissa, Ms. Swizel Furtado, Ms. Sonia Desai, Ms. Pratiksha Sale, and Mrs. Reshma Kerkar, along with the team at the GSPB for their technical assistance. A special thanks to our system administrator, Mr. Madison Dyers, for providing us with technical support. We convey our gratitude to each one of you for an overwhelming response. We have more such international events in the offing, and we hope to have your patronage in the future. Thank you and have a lovely evening.